What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. Oh, man, that was weird. It kind of had spit come on. That was weird. Jock Market is our presenting sponsor. That's what I was looking for. Welcome to the Deeper Dive. Of course, I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm going to be hosting this sucker, but we've got a guy who's analyzing. You guys like him. You guys know him. It's Shit My Money DFS. Adam Scherer, how you doing, my dude?
Doing better than Devin Williams. Did you see that news from the Brewers star reliever?
No, what happened?
Out for the rest of the season, possibly back for the World Series because he broke his hand punching a wall.
Oh, jeez. Is that like a Curt Schilling thing? Didn't Curt Schilling do something like that?
I think Kevin Brown did it.
Okay. And then there was the guy who
Bauer
ran his head into the wall in the NFL on Monday Night Football.
Gus Farrat.
There we go.
And then obviously Bauer in the World Series with the drone.
Oh, man. Just bubble wrap yourself. What are you doing?
Especially, I mean, the Brewers are locked in. Like, they're in the post. Not that, like, there's any good time to break your hand as a pitcher, like punching an inanimate object, but the Brewers are locked in. Like, there's nothing game-related that matters whatsoever.
I mean, luckily they have Joe Hader who exists, so you can just, like, put him on the back end of it now, right? You can just shift him to the end.
Yeah, I don't know where he's even been pitching, but I'd forgotten another good one. The Orioles, Troy Patton years ago, part of the Miguel Tejada trade, I think.
Okay.
He missed like a month and a half or something because he sprained his ankle walking to his car. The actual story, I think, was alcohol related, but that was the report. Was he's out for like a long time because he sprained his ankle walking to his car.
Yeah, I mean, nothing, I guess, beats the fireworks incident for Pierre-Paul. That is still like the all-time, like, oh, maybe nobody will notice my missing fingers. But I guess somebody noticed, and he's still pretty good at football, I suppose. But whatever here. Oh, man, that's crazy. That definitely shifts some stuff. I mean, I like the Brewers still. I mean, they have a ridiculous starting rotation. They've been solidified there for a while. Even with this 17 whatever game win streak the Cardinals are on, they're still not going to get close to that division. It's already over. So I think they were like 6 games up. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's just start. We've got a lot to get to. 13 gamer, Boston minus 276 at Baltimore 9.5. We've got a lot to talk about here, but right off the bat, oh, it's always so great when my stuff doesn't upload as I'm talking about. We got Nathan Eovaldi, I know, is the one pitcher. I'm trying to remember what the other guy's name is. Zach Lother. There it came. Do we need to talk about Zach Lother?
No, we don't. He pitched.
Cool.
No. I mean, he's coming off of a good start against Texas his last time out, but the Red Sox are clearly a much, much different offense than Texas. No real reason to be considering Zach Lother here. No, I mean, there's nothing about him that suggests he's likely to be particularly good in the major leagues. He's just one of these guys in the Orioles system that most likely will be a 4A guy for his career. That's exactly what the Orioles want right now as they battle the Diamondbacks for the worst record in baseball. They don't want anybody up here pitching that actually can get outs. So this guy fills in and gets a really, really bad matchup against the Red Sox.
Which is why we're seeing 6 implied runs here in a fantastic ballpark. Winds blowing in slightly. I don't really give a shit. I don't think anybody else is either, especially considering everybody just hammers lefties on this team. What in the world? It's going to be a fun spot here. But Nathan Eovaldi on the other side, what are we doing with him?
I like him quite a bit here. Refreshing the ownership now, but I'd said this morning I actually thought his ownership could come up a little bit. It's at 15%. To me, that seems a little bit low, just given that he's less expensive than most of the other good pitchers on this slate. I think that mid 8K range can be pretty useful on this slate. And there are a lot of good pitchers today, but most of them also have relatively difficult matchups. That's not the case for Ivaldi, who's facing this Orioles team that's without Anthony Santander. It really, it takes one competent bat out of this lineup. Once you get past that top 4 of Mullins, Mountcastle, Hayes, Mancini, there's not a whole lot to worry about. You have Richie Martin in the lineup batting 9th. He is a glove-first shortstop that cannot hit. Valleca, not a great hitter. McKenna, probably not going to end up being a very good hitter. It's a really bad bottom of the order for the Orioles if you can navigate those top 4. And Ivaldi's been good all season long. He has about a 25.5 25.5% strikeout percentage, 3.5 xFIP. The only reason that I think most of us haven't been rostering Ivaldi more is that he's been really expensive. This is his first time in each of his last 5 starts. He was at least $9,200 on DraftKings. Now he gets dropped down to $8,400 to take on the Orioles. I think he looks really, really good here. I'm kind of surprised the ownership's not higher. I think he's in consideration as an SP2 in cash on DraftKings, and in tournaments. I like him a lot. So I think I'm just a little bit higher than the field.
He got obliterated last game. Adam, did you not see he got obliterated? Box score watching.
Damn it. I didn't know he was cold.
Yeah, see, he's cold, so we can't roster him now. We just can't do it whatsoever. But there we go. One other thing, just working in Ivaldi's favor, and this is something I'll try and touch on when I think it's relevant. But the Red Sox are still battling for a playoff spot. Yeah. There's going to be a couple of pitchers on this slate where I think it's really tough to even give them a shot because their team really has absolutely no reason to let them go deep into a game. The way I'm looking at it with a lot of these guys is if, assuming they're pitching well, because if you put them in your lineup at that point, you're just operating as if they're going to pitch well, are they going to have a short leash or not? And I would expect Ivaldi to go as deep as he can if he is pitching well here. And so that just makes him an even better option, I think. All right. So, first of all, Donovan Garbarino, which is a fantastic name, by the way. That sounds like one of the new characters in the Sopranos movie. That's just a great name. He said, Adam needs to rep the backwards hat more. I like it. I
switched to the other hat because everybody had gotten tired of the backwards hat. So it is time to switch it up. I need to get a new one because the thing is I just don't buy hats and then they get really gross because I just wear them for shows and adjust them constantly. And
if I were on a Tinder date with you, it'd be going well. So there we go. How about that? Right. We'll just chat on fire with that. There we go. Hey, Top Stacks tool. Let's talk about that because it's free today too. Hit that like button too. I forgot to say that at the top of the show. But Boston, 15.7% top stack percentage. Ownership's out of the roof, tier 2, but they're still almost a 10% favorite compared to the next team. I mean, it falls off a cliff for a 13-gamer. What do we do with that kind of information? We don't have Coors Field. They already played earlier today. And then Ryan McMahon, of course, hit a home run in that game. Thanks a lot, guy. Boston, 15.7% top stack percentage. How much are you going to be stacking them up?
I think it's pretty similar to yesterday where they were obviously a really, really good option yesterday. They didn't come through, but they were clearly one of the top options on the slate. The issue is just that with 13 games, when you're getting this much ownership going to a team, it makes it really tough to get to them in those larger field tournaments. You really, when you think about the top stack tool, like you said, they're more than twice as likely as the next closest team to be the top stack. They still have a slightly greater than 85% chance of losing to the field. So when you have 20 to 30% ownership going to almost every hitter on the team, you can still put yourself in some really good spots by just saying, look, if the Red Sox happen to be the highest scoring team or the second or third highest scoring team, then I am probably going to have a bad night, but there's more money to be made by being right on one of these other teams than being right on Boston. And the example I used this morning is I got 5th on DraftKings last night. I had a 4-man Brewer stack that scored 2 runs. I didn't even have Urias, who was the only good hitter in the Brewer stack, but it was just that the Rockies failed, the Red Sox failed. I had some good one-offs, good pitching, and that was enough to get 5th in a 13,000 person tournament because such a high percentage of the field went to 2 different teams. You're seeing a similar thing tonight where just tons and tons of ownerships going to the Red Sox. You're getting a good amount going to a few other teams, but then there's 20 teams on the slate or I guess 22 teams on the slate that are projected for single digit ownership, 21 of them sub 5%. I think I kind of just, even though it's scary and the Red Sox are in a good spot, I think I mostly want to be spread out to these other teams. I'll probably use the Red Sox most as either mini stacks or one-offs in lower owned lineups, try and grab that Hunter Renfroe home run, Bogart's home run, whatever, get 1 or 2 of those home runs, but hope that, ends up being like a 4-run game for Boston where 1 or 2 guys do well, as opposed to a game where, they score 12 runs and the whole team goes off.
Brandon McNeil. I always wondered where Jason got his piano intro for the golf videos. Now I see yours. It all makes sense. Yes, that's a piano. Yes, I know how to rock that thing. No, I don't play Fur-Elise for fun. All right. Do we have to talk about Baltimore whatsoever?
No, I don't think so. All that we really said this morning, and I agreed with Josh, he was getting to a little bit of them. The case I can see is just that they're relatively inexpensive. If you go to Baltimore, you can build a very good lineup outside of them. You're going to have really good one-offs. You're going to have really good pitching. So then you're kind of just saying, okay, if I somehow get lucky and the Orioles score 7 runs, I can be in a good spot. But there's plenty of other teams you can do that with today. There's teams that look better. So not anticipating getting much, if any, Baltimore.
All right, Garrett Cole. Jose Barrios, next one up. Yankees, Blue Jays. just flip a coin on this one. That's what Vegas is saying. You've got two great offenses, but two great pitchers. That kind of makes for some fireworks. We've seen both these pitchers get rocked lately. I don't know if that makes them hot or cold. Somebody can tell me. I don't really give a shit. I'm going to be playing both of them, I think, in quite a bit of quantity, especially considering Berrios. 4% ownership is kind of surprising for a guy. 10.2% top two pitcher percentage. And the Yankees can strike out from time to time when, I guess, confirmed hot hitter Giancarlo Stanton isn't hitting a homer every single game. But talk to me about pitching in this one.
I'm with you. I'm kind of surprised Berrios' ownership is as low as it is. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of just end up being a little low there and you get like 8 or 9% on Berrios. But either way, I expect him not to get much ownership just because there are some other really good pitchers. He does have a tough matchup against the Yankees, but it does make me interested in going to him in tournaments because I think, and I said it before, but for the most part, the good pitchers on this slate have tough matchups. Sonny Gray's got the White Sox, Nola's got the Braves, Cole's got the Blue Jays, even Scherzer's got the Padres. So there's not, the good pitcher against Miami or something like that. And so it makes me a little bit more willing to go to somebody like Berrios in a scary spot against the Yankees. He's got about a 26% strikeout percentage this year. He's a good pitcher, 3.62 xFIP. He's on a team that has a lot to play for. So he's another one where if he is pitching well, you're not concerned about the manager just saying like, okay, you're at 5 innings, go to the shower. They're going to let him, throw his normal workload. Yeah. So the ceiling is certainly there. It's just a matter of it being a rough matchup, but that's mitigated by the fact he's probably not going to be that popular. So certainly not the top projected pitcher, not somebody I'd consider in cash, but I do like just his talent level at that ownership.
Yeah. And if I just kind of like put these two thoughts together where Garrett Cole, 33.9% K percentage, but gets a Toronto team that strikes out dead last against right-handed pitching at 20%, tied with Houston. So for a little bit of reference, that's a low number. And then you have Berrios, 26% K percentage. And of course, the Yankees are definitely a scary matchup, but they strike out at a 24.7% K percentage. I feel like Cole and Berrios should just be equally owned. And I understand price is still a consideration, but in tournaments, it's not. And so I feel like getting to both of them about the same and being over the field is probably something I want to do. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure if I agree Berrios should be as popular as Cole, just because Cole's ceiling is still on a completely different planet than Berrios. But I do view them as similar pitchers in that I don't like this spot for Garrett Cole either. I think this is very similar to the last time Cole pitched against Boston. And it feels weird to say, but like, I'm not even considering Garrett Cole in cash, which is crazy, but it's just a brutal matchup. The Blue Jays have the lowest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They have the third highest WRC plus. They have the fifth highest ISO, but that doesn't mean Garrett Cole doesn't still have a massive ceiling. It means he's less likely to reach it, but he's got a 33.9% strikeout percentage. He's on a team that needs to win. If he's pitching well, they're going to let him keep going. So when he does have that, he's still, from a skill standpoint, he's capable of dominating any team any given night. And if he does, he's still got, I think him or Scherzer have the highest raw point ceilings on the slate. So it's another spot where, just like I think Berrios makes for a good tournament option because he's not getting a lot of ownership, I think Cole does as well. He's getting 16% ownership, which isn't nothing, but you compare that to Max Scherzer, that, it's like half of Scherzer. It's less than Carlos Rodon, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm interested to get your take on that, but makes zero sense why Carlos Rodon's getting 20% ownership right now. So if that holds through lock, I am interested in Cole, just, where I am going to more popular bats. If I have a low owned stack, I want Scherzer. But if I'm playing the Red Sox or if I'm playing the Twins or one of these other popular teams, going to Cole is one way you can differentiate because you're getting the same raw point ceiling Max Scherzer has, even though he's less likely to get there. But you're getting it at much less ownership.
Oh, we'll get to Carlos Rodon for sure. But yesterday, one of the reasons that I didn't get completely obliterated, even though I got no stacks or bats right the entire night, was that I had 0% of guys like Brady Singer and 0% of guys like Brandon Woodruff, who I just thought was carrying a lot of ownership for a spot where he could end up. I didn't expect him to pitch that poorly, but it was just, I had pitch count concerns and I didn't think they would push him. But then you find out people are punching walls and breaking hands, and I don't really know what to think after the fact. Whatever. Let's continue it on here. This is just such a weird spot, considering these are two unbelievable offenses, and there isn't a single bat over 1.5% owned in the entire game. Just kind of mind-blowing, but it's appropriate. 13 gamer, a lot of other places to go. What are you doing with bats at all, if anything?
I think it's kind of similar to yesterday in that there's literally no matchup where if the Blue Jays and the Yankees are completely unowned, where I would say it's a bad idea to go to them, but they're still not going to be a team that I prioritize here because clearly it is a difficult spot for both guys or for both teams. Cole, one of the best pitchers in baseball. Berríos, really, really good as well. If I were to go to one team, I would get to the Yankees first, just because Berríos isn't as good as Cole, but also they're priced more favorably. The Blue Jays aren't getting any sort of discount on DraftKings for the Garrett Cole matchup. 6,300 for Guerrero, 55 for Bichette, 54 for Semien. That's pretty tough when there are a lot of mispriced teams on this slate. The opportunity cost of paying up at hitter is pretty high today. And so I'm not really looking to do that. And then also have those hitters be facing Garrett Cole. I think there's a better case to be made, taking some chance on the power bats on the Yankees, Rizzo, LeMahieu, Gallo, Torres, all these guys mid 4Ks, Stanton 5K, Judge 5,500, but they're just going to be a little bit easier to stack than the Blue Jays, I think. So neither one's a priority. Both teams are always appealing when they're getting no ownership, but I think the Yankees will be easier to get to if you are going to one of them.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right, let's get a read in quick because we're going to be just flying. But Awesemo Plus tools and content, $29.95 for the weekly pass. Projections, ownership projections, premium Slack channel, lineup builder, so many different things we have behind the paywall. The best place you can be invested to help with your game. And we're going to give you 25% off when you use promo code MLB Deeper Dive. All caps, one word, MLB Deeper Dive for 25% off that Awesemo Plus Platinum subscription. And then $4.95 if you want to just check out the MLB DFS stuff. And today, of course, we've got some free stuff you can check out. The Top Pitchers tool. Definitely be taking advantage of that. See what we have to offer behind the paywall. Stop guessing, start winning. All right, Miami.
I do have one more quick thing from that game.
Go ahead.
The Yankees do still have, strikeout upside because of Judge, Stanton, Gallo. But I think it is worth mentioning that this lineup does strike out a little bit less. Like LeMahieu and Rizzo are both sub 20% strikeout guys against right-handed pitching, but also Torres is only at 20.8% for the year. Gardner's at 20%. So it's not quite as high a strikeout matchup as the Yankees can give you at times.
That makes sense. That was a great addition. God, you're so lovely. Cool. Miami plus 154 at New York Mets, 7.5 total runs in this one. Eliezer Hernandez on one side, no thanks. Taiwan Walker on the other. Oh my God. His top two pitcher percentage is outrageous. His ownership is outrageous. Part of that is just a mispriced thing. And remember how I told you, I was like, I haven't played this dude all year. And then the price dropped and I took some shots on it and it wasn't very pretty. And he got murdered against Boston. And then it moved. How do we get away from playing Taiwan Walker at 6,600 today?
It's tough because the salary is definitely wrong for the matchup. He should just be 7,600 or 8K. So he projects really well. I think he's easily the best point per dollar projected pitcher, towards the bottom of the pricing tier. But it's still risky when the guy's projected for 37% ownership. The one thing I think you need to think about before you put him into lineups is kind of, it's not like it's risk-free. The Marlins are still a Major League Baseball team. In the second half this year, Walker has only struck out 18.5% of hitters. He has a 5.37 xFIP. In the first half, he had a 25% strikeout percentage, 3.93 xFIP. He's been flat out bad in the second half this year. Granted, Miami this season has an 80 WRC plus, 25.5% strikeout percentage. It's not hard to see how Taiwan Walker goes out there and has a good game, but I think it is important just to not overestimate the chances that, or underestimate, I guess, the chances of Walker just sucking here. I mean, it's still completely on the table. So it is someone where I want to pay attention to the rest of my lineup for sure. If you're stacking the Red Sox, it's going to be pretty easy to go, Scherzer, Red Sox, Walker. Not sure I really want to go that route, just because if all of those pieces have success, there's a lot of teams that have the same build as me that I have to compete with. So I'd be more likely in a build like that to be, maybe pivoting Scherzer to Cole, maybe, but also, potentially pivoting Walker to anybody else, kind of that's cheap and isn't getting ownership. So I think it's, you don't want to just completely forego Walker because he does project really well at his price point. And it does give you some safety. I don't like using the word safety in baseball because everybody's floor is essentially non-existent. But in the sense of like, if Walker goes out there, gives up, 3-4 earned runs, but strikes out 6 guys, gets you like 12, 13 fantasy points, he's not going to actively win you a tournament. Like, you're still not going to be happy that you have him, but those savings are still going to make it so the rest of your team can kind of pick up the slack and he didn't kill you. So you do get a little bit of added safety because of how cheap he is, but there's still a relatively good chance that he just puts up a score that you do not need. So I think that he's a good play in low owned lineups. I'll be staying away from him in my higher owned lineups. In cash on DraftKings, I think he's in play as an SP2. I'm not sure if he's necessary, not sure if I end up using him, but certainly He's fine just because of how cheap he is.
Are you still kind of playing some FanDuel stuff? I don't want to like put it out there that you're playing FanDuel now to people who don't know, but there you go.
Yeah, I'm playing. I haven't built anything yet.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because Taiwan Walker getting a crazy amount of ownership, 24% over there at 7,300. I'm just curious where you're going to come in on that. So maybe we'll revisit that at the very end if we have time, which we probably won't. We got to get flying here. Miami and Mets here. Eliezer Hernandez on the other side. He's all right, but I just don't see getting to him a lot on this slate.
Yeah, I don't see getting to him a lot either. Really, the only case I see for him is sort of, like I said, if you have a more popular team and you need a relatively cheap pitcher, anybody other than Taiwan Walker, Hernandez certainly can beat Walker or will beat Walker a decent percentage of the time here. I don't love the matchup for him. He's facing a lot of left-handed bats in this lineup. He's had issues with lefties for essentially his whole career. So I don't love the spot, but if you're just comparing him to Walker, I think that getting essentially 10 or 11 to 1 odds is plenty to, use Hernandez in some specific lineups.
ABG just said in the chat, I'm going to go crazy and stack the Marlins once. Well, yeah, in 150, you could probably go up against the most popular pitcher on the slate and stack him once. Or, in my event, I might have a couple shares in Miami. Who knows? Might get wild, but a 3.3 implied total. God, I normally would want to pick on it, but I just don't know how to pick on it with any good bats because there's no talent here.
I really don't mind it here. And part of the reason is because so let me clarify. I don't mind it as in like, I don't think it's a horrible idea. I'm not anticipating.
There are 100,000 entries in the tournament. Go ahead and put one lineup in.
So the thing I think that does work in their favor, I hate the price on Jazz Chisholm. I wish Rojas wasn't so expensive. But other than that, this team is really cheap. A $3,300 Jesus Sanchez is a pretty solid option. De La Cruz, 3K hitting third. Diaz, 2,300. Brinson, 2,400. They do let you build that lineup like I was mentioning with the Orioles, but the matchup for Miami is clearly better than it is for the Orioles. The reason I think Miami is appealing is twofold. One, you get the negative correlation with Walker, which is really nice. If Miami has a big game, a third of the field is just drawing dead no matter what they did with stacks. But also, they potentially, if the slate breaks down the way that like last night did, where the Red Sox fail and then like let's say the Twins fail, if you even get like 5 runs from Miami, you potentially can be in a really good spot because it's going to let you get really good secondary stacks. It's going to let you get really good pitching to where you don't necessarily need the Marlins to be the highest scoring team if the most popular teams don't do well. So I do think that it does kind of give you a couple paths to success. I'm more interested in Miami tonight than I am most nights.
Are you interested in the Mets whatsoever? A team that has some upside. They're not playing for anything at this point. They're going a little over-owned, maybe some one-offs. I don't see a whole lot here.
I like a couple of the bats here. I think that there's some good value. Michael Conforto in particular is $2,900 on DraftKings. I don't really know why. Eliezer Hernandez this year against left-handed hitters has allowed a 295 expected ISO. Go back to the start of the 2019 season, 235 expected ISO. Michael Conforto this season has a 192 expected ISO, 355 expected WOBA against right-handed pitching. It's not like he's hitting really poorly or something. He's fine. He's 2,900. Nimmo is hitting really poorly, only a 117 expected ISO, but still he's 3,300 leading off. So I think both of those guys are really good values, especially Conforto. But then also, you have VR, you have Smith that are both really cheap as you move your way down the order. You can kind of do the same thing with the Mets that I was just saying with the Marlins. Like if you go Nimmo, Conforto, VR, Smith, and then throw in, 4K Peter Alonso, you've spent basically nothing on this stack. They have power and you can do whatever you want around them. So I am pretty interested in the Mets here.
Yeah, play some Scherzer, play some Nola, move on with your day in that regard. Or you prefer maybe Garrett Cole, maybe Montas. That's going to be an interesting one when we get there as well. I have nothing else from this game. Anything for you?
No, surprising amount of bat interest for me.
Yeah, it is very surprising. Somebody also said 2,300 on FD for Conforto. Yeah, it's a low number. Again, batting third, that's a good spot. We've got the Phillies, 3.7 implied runs here for them going up against Max Fried, but Aaron Nola on the mound for the Phillies. He was somebody that I was just you expect him to be at the top of that board. On FanDuel, he's 9,200. I thought that was kind of fascinating for him. 9,500 seems about appropriate, but he's going much lower owned, partially because this matchup is actually a very difficult one. But if you give me Aaron Nola under 10%, I'm going to want to take shots. How about you? Yeah,
just replay everything I just said about Barrios, basically. Nola's a good pitcher. He's not quite as good typically outside of Philadelphia, but it's more so that he's elite in Philadelphia, and then he's really good outside of it. Overall this year, a 30.3% strikeout percentage, 3.3 xFIP. I don't love the matchup. The Braves do have a 4.5 implied run total. The lineup is kind of difficult to strike out. Like, it's split up to where, Soler, Riley, Duvall, Swanson strike out. D'Arnaud at a decent rate as well. But Freeman and Albies are so tough to strike out that it kind of drives it down since they're hitting second and third. So I think a pretty mediocre spot, but just based on the talent, it's a reasonable price tag on Nola for sure. If he were popular here, I would get away pretty quickly. But at 8%, he gives you a very high ceiling. He's certainly somebody I'd want to be using where in lineups that I'm using more popular bats.
Max Fried on the other side, another guy, we can just replay everything we said there, but not nearly as talented of a pitcher, I don't think, but he's cheaper, 8,600, going underrepresented. How about him?
Yeah, not as much strikeout upside, only a 23.7% strikeout percentage this year, but he is a little bit less expensive. He does have a 3.46 xFIP. The Phillies lineup doesn't give you a ton of strikeouts either, despite what Charlie Morton would have you believe after last night. This is a pretty difficult team to strike out. So I don't love the strikeout upside for Fried, but I do think he's a talented pitcher. And it kind of goes back to the discussion with Barrios and Cole too. There's not really many good pitchers that have good matchups tonight. Most pitchers that we talk about that are talented, there's like that, but the matchup kind of sucks. So that makes it a little bit less concerning that I don't really like Fried's matchup that much because I don't really like most of their matchups that much.
I was going to say the nice thing, Matt Vierling went from 8th, then he batted 5th yesterday. I wish I'd kind of taken more note of that. I got to over the field in Morton, but I could have had even a little bit more. 27.7% K percentage leads the way on this Phillies team when you're talking about positional players. So his lineup bump, good thing for a good hitter, but also a good thing in terms of targeting him because he does strike out a little bit more. So just a small thing, not that big of a deal, but enough of a deal that I should have taken note of that last time out. All right, Bats. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I was just trying to see what their lineup has done against left-handed pitching the last few years. But yeah, I mean, Herrera 16%, Gregorius 16%, Torreyes 11%. Yeah, McCutchen 18%, Harper's 26%, but obviously really good. Segura 13%. It's a tough lineup to rack up strikeouts against.
Yeah, Morton 28.5% K percentage, and we've seen these days where it's just like that zone was a little absurd too. But that's a different talk for a different day when we aren't on 13 games. Anything from Bats for you here on this game?
Not really. The Braves are one of those teams I'd never mind getting to, but I don't really want to target Aaron Nola on this slate. I think there's other spots I like a little bit more. The pricing isn't great either when you have the 2, 3, 4 hitters all north of 5K. On the other side, basically the same thing. The guys that I would, that you typically want to get to, Harper and Real Muto, are both really expensive. McCutchen and Vierling, I guess, are cheap enough that I don't mind taking shots at them, but there's not really anything that stands out bat-wise.
All right, we're going Detroit plus 154 at Minnesota, 9 total runs here in this one. Casey Mize, not very good at pitching. Michael Pineda, not very good at pitching. Talk to me about either of them.
Pineda, I think, is a reasonable pivot away from Walker if you need to save ownership. Walker's the preferred option in terms of projection, but Pineda sucks for sure. But the Tigers do strike out quite a bit. He's just going to beat Walker often enough where you're not really sacrificing ceiling, you're sacrificing medium projection, but the ownership can make it worth it depending on your lineup. Other than that, nothing good to say about either of these pitchers. Not expecting Mize to go deep enough into this game to matter.
And it's so weird because I feel like I'm going to get to more Detroit, and Minnesota is just so owned. By far the most negatively leveraged team over on DK.com. So hard for me to want to go there. What are you going to do with such a popular Minnesota Twins team for the second night in a row?
It's pretty similar to Boston. I'm getting a little bit less ownership on the Twins, but still a pretty appealing stack. Mize has really struggled with left-handed bats in particular this year, only expecting them to get 1 or 2 plate appearances against him before they turn it over to the bullpen, which we know that always can be kind of dicey even against teams with bad bullpens. But Mize has allowed a 282 expected ISO, 397 expected WOBA to left-handed hitters so far in his major league career. So sets up pretty nicely for, in particular, Jorge Polanco and Max Kepler. Also, you have Arias leading off, so he maybe gets 2 plate appearances. Nick Gordon has actually been hitting pretty well, and he's really cheap. But in particular, Polanco and Kepler, I think, look really good. Buxton and Donaldson pretty much always look good. I expect to be under the field in terms of full stacks, but similarly to Boston, I do think Minnesota is offers some of the top options at their position. So certainly looking to some of these guys in cash games. And then also, if I am stacking, I don't know, Miami, then there's no reason that I'm shying away from Minnesota's ownership at that point.
Miggy Cabrera, Heimer Candelario. A couple of these guys kind of stick out to me, throwing them into some random lineups. Again, just meaning that I'm going to get to Minnesota bats, but like in terms of allocation to the stack, like Detroit, I'm probably gonna have a little bit more of, just because Minnesota's going so overowned. Give me the field here in this spot. Do you like Detroit whatsoever?
Yeah, Akil Baddoo in particular. Pineda just really isn't a good pitcher. I'm kind of surprised the Tigers' implied run total is only at 3.9. I get it's the Tigers, but Pineda doesn't strike out guys from either side of the plate. 182 expected ISO to lefties, 199 to righties this year. Baddoo at 4K looks good, but then, Scope, Grossman, Cabrera, Candelario, Haas, these guys all have enough power that I think they can do damage against Pineda. So not a team that I expect to have tons of, but I do think the prices look pretty good, and I do like the matchup.
All right, let's move it along. Milwaukee, St. Louis, Adrian Hauser, Miles Mikolas. Neither pitcher are we going to really be going to, or are you going to be rostering either one whatsoever? Because I got nothing.
I don't have anything here. Hauser, I have pretty strong concerns about how deep he goes into the game. We saw Brandon Woodruff get pulled at 63 pitches after 4 innings last night. I had said I thought that was a concern with the Brewers having the division wrapped up, and the fact that they're not catching anybody else. They're not catching whoever wins the West. So there's really no reason for them to let guys go deep in the games. It's more so just, keep them fresh for the postseason. On top of that, it's not like Hauser's a great strikeout pitcher. It's not a great strikeout matchup. He's not cheap. But the thing that kind of makes it so I'm not even really interested in getting him in lineups is that I just don't think he has that top end outcome, because I don't think they'll let him go that far.
We have Jace Peterson with 0% ownership at 2,200 batting leadoff. My guess is that changes. Just a hunch on that one. So looking forward to that, but he's leading off here 2,200. I think that's going to be a bat that gains quite a bit of steam, just because he gives you some savings here. It's 80 degrees in St. Louis, one of the warmer game environments that we have here. But does anything stick out to you from the Milwaukee side?
I actually like full stacks here. They are a really cheap team that actually has power. You compare them to Miami, and there's just so much more power in this lineup. I don't know why they're so inexpensive. Miles Mikolas is not terrible at preventing power. He's allowed 1.15 home runs per 9 innings this year. Since the start of the 2019 season, a 151 expected ISO to lefties, 175 to righties, about an 18% strikeout percentage to hitters from either side of the plate. So he's someone that does an okay job limiting power, but he's not great at it. He doesn't get strikeouts, and you're just getting a free Milwaukee team where, Peterson's leading off at 2,200. That's obviously nice, but Willy Adames, late scratch yesterday, back in the lineup today, at least for now, only 3,300, really, really cheap. Yelich, not nearly what he used to be, clearly, but still cheap, still has a 350 expected WOBA against right-handed pitching this year. He's 3,800. Escobar's got power. Dan Vogelbach hitting 5th at 2,100. Jackie Bradley at 2K flat. I mean, this is a team where, for the amount of speed and power they have, you get a really, really high ceiling, even, acknowledging they have a 3.8 implied run total. They're not going to come through all that often. Mikolas isn't the worst pitcher in the world. Acknowledging all of that, and just thinking about like what they have the potential to do with the power and speed that they have, and then what you can put around them in your lineup as far as pitching and one-offs and mini stacks go. If they're not going to get a lot of ownership, I expect to be getting to quite a bit of Milwaukee for those reasons.
And St. Louis, Lowell Snootball leading off there, number 1 up top, 2.3K for him as well. Then Dylan Carlson batting 3rd for 3K. You've got no Nolan Arenado there in that lineup. Yay, congratulations, you're in the postseason. Have a seat. Matt Carpenter, 2K, batting 4th. I can't play it. I can't do it. Talk me out of playing Matt Carpenter.
This lineup is so bad, but he's also 2K.
They're so cheap.
Yeah. I mean, Hauser's not a bad pitcher. Again, I just don't think he goes that deep into this game. If I had any level of confidence he was going to go deep, I'd like him, against this particular lineup. But it's also tough. Like, what's their ownership looking like? We have them getting like no ownership.
Yeah, I think we need to update it here, because I mean, those lineups came out, they were a little bit later.
Okay, yeah, we don't have Carpenter yet.
Yeah, because Carpenter's in there, and that's just going to mess everything up. Jace Peterson, 2.2K. I mean, this whole game was going to look very wonky. Milwaukee, obviously mourning their closer, Rip City there, and then the Cardinals, they celebrated late last night. Nolan Arenado's having a seat, so I mean, they don't care about anything else going forward from here. I mean, they're pretty much solidified where they're at. They're in the wild card game, so I want to play some of these leadoff guys, like a guy like Lars Nootbaar. I mean, there's like a 0% chance he's getting that he's getting pinch hit for in this spot, right?
You would think. I mean, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like 5 at bats for a guy who's 2.3K. Same thing, Dylan Carlson, 3K for him. I mean, you got to still have some interest. And all these other, like, is Milwaukee going to utilize their main relievers in this spot now, coming off of like this news?
Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, and I think the young guys in particular, Nootbaar, Carlson, Bader, like, you want these guys getting at bats. They're not going to be like, it's a 1-run game, time for Nolan Arenado to hit for Dylan Carlson or something, like, right. Or at least you wouldn't think. So that looks pretty good. I like Carlson a lot at 3K. Carpenter at 2K is fine. Like, he's still batting cleanup. He's just washed, but it's 2K. I think you can make a lot of the same arguments for the Cardinals that I made for the Brewers. I prefer the Brewers side just because they have mostly their actual major league hitters in there at really cheap price tags, whereas the Cardinals are mostly using their AAA squad / bench at really cheap price tags. So between the two, I lean Milwaukee, but ownership certainly will dictate that when we get the update. And you can make very, very similar roster construction arguments in favor of the Cardinals.
Greg is going to be so mad at me. We are so going over and there's like nothing stopping it. But of course, we have to talk about Jock Market before we go on to the next game. That is the sponsor of the Deeper Dive here today. And if you haven't had a chance to play over there, super clean interface, super easy to understand. All you're doing is you're buying, selling, trading shares. There's a pregame IPO. You pick up the shares of those players. Or if you want to get in a little bit later, pick up the shares after they lock. If you see somebody pinch hit for, go ahead and sell your shares of that guy. If you see somebody that gets, added in, who's like $1, go ahead and add them. If they're going to come out and like a Nolan Arenado with the bases loaded and they pinch hit for him, in the pitcher spot, like absolutely go and utilize that. That's going to be something you want to do over on overhead Jock Market. That's the first time I've ever done that, by the way. But Jock Market is so fun and super easy to play. NBA when that comes back, NHL when that comes back, PGA is this weekend. Such a fun deal. They're probably going to have that pregame IPO closing pretty soon. So you want to go over and check that out. I'll be doing a show with Ben Rasa here covering all the golf that you need in an hour and a half. So check that out as well. But use promo code Awesemo. You get a $50 first deposit bonus. It's fantastic. Buy, sell, hold these shares. Super easy to play. Look at some of these back order guys. They always go for cheap, like $2, $1.50. And you see guys like Vlad, who's going up against Garrett Cole, still go for an expensive amount. Fade those guys. Get away from them. And then also, if somebody gets up at bat and hits a home run, go ahead and jump on getting those shares because they're going to vault up that leaderboard. So Jock Market, one of the best spots you can play. And with that promo code Awesemo, that $50 bonus doesn't get a whole lot better than that. That's how you build a bankroll, and that's how you sustain a bankroll. So check them out. And thank you so much to them for their sponsorship. Really do enjoy playing over there. All right. We got the Angels, Texas Rangers. We're going to get flying here. We've got Jansen Junk. Yikes. Taylor Hearn on the other side. Yikes again. Are we going to be stacking up both these teams a lot again tonight?
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in both teams again. They were disappointing yesterday, but Junk I don't think is going to be very good in the majors. Granted, he certainly can have a good start against Texas. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. Zach Lother struck out like 7 or 8 guys against the Rangers, but I also just don't think he's going deep enough in the games for me to want to roster him. I do like the way that Texas's roster is constructed from a stacking standpoint. The only thing I think that I would like to be different is I wish that Jonah Heim was catching instead of Trevino, but you get the 2K Willie Calhoun leading off. By the way, this is one reason why I think, even though like obviously Peterson and Nootbaar are going to get ownership, I don't think it ends up being anything crazy because there's just so many cheap guys at this point in the season. Calhoun leading off at 2K, very, very clearly a good option. Connor Falefa, Garcia, Lowe, Ibanez, these guys are all pretty solid plays as well. Trevino sucks. He has a 63 career WRC plus in 153 games, but he's a $2,200 catcher. Taveras has some speed, batting 7th. It's not a team I'm super confident in, but I think they are facing a pretty bad pitcher. On the other side, I think Taylor Hearn is the better pitcher of the two. If for some reason I need a 50, a 5K or so pitcher today, I'm okay taking some shots on Hearn. He is fully stretched out, but with all the value bats, I really don't think that's necessary. You're getting really cheap Angels bats though. Kurt Suzuki, $2,600 catcher batting cleanup, I think is one of the better point per dollar catcher options. Mayfield and Gosselin batting 2nd and 3rd are 2 really good values as well. You have Taylor Ward back in the lineup batting 6th. The only lefties in the lineup are Ohtani and Walsh, who obviously are just really good hitters. So both these stacks I think look as good as the Angels or Rangers can ever look.
I would definitely agree with all of it. Taylor Hearn actually getting some ownership, 9.2% ownership there. 5,100. That goes a long way in being able to help that out. But way to cover that game in like 4. You told me before the show that you could cover this entire slate in 6 minutes, and I didn't believe you. I do now. Now I'm a believer. That was excellent. All right, can we move along?
Yeah.
Oh, God, what a hero. Drew Rasmussen on the mound for the Rays, 5.5K for him. I don't think we need to be doing that. Luis H. Garcia, 9.2K on the other side. Basically 50-50 here. Tampa Bay plus 125, Houston minus 136. How are we handling pitching here? Because Luis H. Garcia, I just like saying the H in the middle of it. What are we doing with him?
I don't see much here. Garcia, the matchup against Tampa Bay is tough. A really, really good offense. There are strikeouts in this lineup. My concern, though, is just that Garcia is not inexpensive. He's 9,200. He hasn't thrown more than 90 pitches in at least 10 straight starts. I didn't look back further than that, but Houston's pretty clearly not giving him that extra inning, letting him go, as deep as you would expect somebody like Nola or any of these other like 9K plus pitchers to go if they're pitching well. So that makes it pretty tough to get there. On the other side, Rasmussen, really tough matchup. Probably not going deep enough to really matter. And with all the hitting value, again, I just don't really see the point in paying down for pitching all that much.
Larry C just said that Eric explaining how fast that took was longer than the way that you took it. So well done by you. Props, Larry C. That's funny. Brandon Lau getting some ownership. He's about the only bat gaining any substantial ownership. Everybody else underneath 2.5 percentage. Can we just rinse, repeat everything we said about the Blue Jays and Yankees?
Yes, except for these pitchers are clearly more favorable to take batters against.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not viewing Rasmussen the same way you view Cole. The issue for the Astros, though, is that they are expensive. You do get Michael Brantley back in the lineup. He's still 3,900. But the problem is that there's so many really, really cheap bats on this slate, even in offenses that have upside. Then you look at the good hitters on Houston. And if you're going, 1 through 7, excluding Brantley, or even if you include Brantley, you're still using 4 guys that are at least $4,900. It's going to be really, really tough to get that, 2 good pitchers plus good one-offs situation. You can use some value bats. You can use like a Calhoun or something to help offset the salary. But the point being, it might be a little bit difficult to get a team that has quite as high a ceiling as some of these cheaper high upside offenses do. On the other side for Tampa Bay, pricing is a bit more favorable. After you get past Nelson Cruz, there's nobody in the lineup above $3,800. So I think that even though they have the lower implied run total here, and if pricing were equal, I would rather get to the Astros. But given the pricing, I think I actually lean towards Tampa Bay a little bit. But same kind of idea. Just they're both low owned. They both have really high ceilings. They're both relatively unlikely to do well in their respective matchups.
This is just like a personal bias, and I'm very aware that what I'm about to say is stupid, but Michael Brantley has not gone over 20 DraftKings points. And I know he's been out for 2 weeks, but Michael Brantley has not gone over 20 DK points since he put up 21 on July 16th. It's crazy.
Yeah, not the highest upside.
Second in that. Yeah, he's just not a high upside dude for sure. It's just so weird that, on the season, he's only got 8 homers, batting 315. That's nifty. And, in a stack, I'm not saying he needs to put up 20 plus, but it just feels like there's no upside with this dude lately for the last 2.5, 3 months.
I mean, for the season, he only has a 159 expected ISO against right-handed pitching, but he has a 385 expected WOBA.
Somebody just asked, besides catcher, what position would y'all punt? I don't know if I necessarily look at it like that. It just really depends on my entire lineup, but shortstop always seems like a good one to punt.
Yeah, I don't really look at it like that. It depends on a lot, like what teams you're stacking, and kind of what positions the best players on those teams play. But also outfield's normally pretty easy, especially this time of year. I mean, we've already just off the top of my head mentioned Calhoun, Newt Barr, Peterson, all with outfield eligibility. So that's normally one where, the opportunity cost is high, but there's so many relatively good outfielders. Conforto at 2,900. So that's one where I pay down quite a bit.
All righty, here we go. Let's talk about some pitching. We got Cincinnati plus 167, Chicago White Sox minus 182. I guess that started to trend down a little bit. I guess White Sox are starting to see a little money coming in towards them. Carlos Rodon, can I get you on board? No, I do not want to do that. Let's talk Sonny Gray here first.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were about to say something else.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, so for Sonny Gray, rinse, repeat Aaron Nola, rinse, repeat Jose Barrios. This slate's tough because it's just there's so many spots where it's just they could do well, but I'm not really that confident. But again, it just kind of, you end up playing the ownership game there. And right now we have Sonny Gray projected for 1% ownership, 6.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So, again, there's I prefer Nathan Eovaldi at this price tag if ownership doesn't matter and I'm just trying to play the top projected guy. But if I want to save some ownership, there's no reason not to consider Sonny Gray. He has the 5th highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 26.9%, 3.64 xFIP. He's a good ground ball pitcher. It's not a very good matchup. The White Sox are a good lineup they're running a pretty solid lineup out there today. It's not like you're getting the, Zach Collins over Yasmani Grandal lineup or anything like that. So it's certainly not a good spot, but Gray has the ability to just have good games against anyone. So I don't expect to be jamming him into a lot of lineups, but I do think that he serves a role on the slate just as someone that you can use to offset ownership if you're stacking a more popular team.
So I'm going to just throw this out there because I didn't know that you felt the same way that I did, but I can tell you right now in 150 lineups that I will have 0% Carlos Rodon.
That's my expectation. Like if it's more than 0, I would expect it to be like 3 or 4 or something.
That's crazy. We're on the same page with that because we didn't talk about this slate at all before the show. I had like 3 minutes before the show. We got done with another one jumping into this, but I can tell you right now, I will have 0%.
I don't really understand why people are going there.
I hope they do. And again, he's a fantastic pitcher, but this is pitch count and basically playing Carlos Rodon, you need 2 things to happen. And this is the Ben Rosso way of thinking. And I love the way that he puts this out. You can have one good thing happen and you can kind of predict on that. But when you're asking 2 things, one, he needs to rack up a ton of strikeouts very quickly against a Cincinnati team that has some decent enough hitters at the top end of this order. And sure, it is a little bit thin. You're getting just a bunch of righties here up until you get to Schrock in the 8 hole. So, that's going to be tougher for him. And then the second thing you need is to be wrong about his pitch count, which I don't think I will be.
Right. It would be, I'd feel totally differently if we were projecting Carlos Rodon for 4% ownership. Correct. I would just say, okay, maybe somehow, maybe Tony La Russa, I think Josh made the case the other day that you could just have like a blacked out Tony La Russa by the 5th inning and he forgets to take him out. But if 20% of the field is going there, I don't really see I don't see what there is to gain. If Rodon goes out there and I'm wrong and he throws 90 pitches or something, or in 65 pitches, he somehow strikes out 10 guys. I guess that's possible with how good he is. If one of those things happen, I'm still competing with 20% of the field that has him. It's not like it gave me a huge leg up on anyone else like it would if you were 4 or 5% owned. What's more likely to happen is that he gets pulled after 4 or 5 innings. He scores 16 DraftKings points, 17 DraftKings points. Not bad, but nothing that's, winning you a tournament, especially
you need the whole 9K range to fail.
Right. Exactly. It's most likely the top of his range of outcomes is just completely chopped off. Like we have him projected for 20 DraftKings points. I think that, in my opinion, that's a little bit high, but even if we say that number works, I think it's just unlikely that normally if a pitcher is projected for 20, he's got a pretty decent chance that, going 26, 27, 28 points in any given start. I don't really think that exists for Carlos Rodon unless I'm just completely wrong on his pitch count, in which case, I'm just willing to take that chance. I don't think that I am.
Nope, you're dead on. Sam Van Dam said, DK single entry. Can it be viable to play a pitcher against a one-up bat in the same lineup? If this were a 3-game slate, yes. On a 13-gamer, I understand maybe you're looking for value in a Suzuki and a Lars Nootbaar. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's just, on a slate this size, I just don't do it. Technically, if you really wanted to go through every game, sometimes there's going to be one hitter that looks really, really good, even if, you think the pitcher is going to have success everywhere else. But there's just so many good hitting options. There's no real reason to negatively correlate your lineup on a slate this big.
All right. So I want to stack up Cincinnati on the other side, but it's not a very good lineup. You have some power with Keno in the 7 hole there. You have some power, obviously 436 for Suarez, 439 expected slugging for Jonathan India. But for me, it's just kind of like a stay away all around.
Yeah, because it's not that I expect Carlos Rodon to struggle. It's that I expect him to pitch well. I just don't expect him to go far enough into the game that I regret not having him unless, like you said, just every other pitcher on this slate does poorly. I'm fully expecting, upper teens or something like that from Carlos Rodon. It's just that I don't think he can get to that, 30-point mark that you would really like on a 13-game slate. So it's a bad lineup. It's a good spot for Rodon. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate. He's one of the best pitchers on the slate. I'm not looking to take hitters against him.
Absolutely. And then on the other side, the White Sox, they always have a ton of power, always a ton of upside here, but man, they are way down on the top stacks. Well, I guess there is some positive leverage to be had with them. You saw a guy in Robert yesterday who just went Yahtzee twice. So, he's hot. So how about that? We'll play the hot hitter. We'll play a 5,900 Luis Robert in this spot, right?
Yeah, of course. I do. I was just looking at Carlos Rodon's recent games. And he's so good.
He's disgusting.
25.5 points on 86 pitches against the Red Sox 2 starts ago, 34.9 on 89 pitches, but only 5 innings against the Cubs back in August. he still can burn you. I just think it's so unlikely that
well, and that was a month ago,
right?
Like that was 2 months ago. That was on August 7th.
Right. That's the thing too. Like, yeah, it was only 5 innings, but let's say at the end of 4 innings today, he has like 73 pitches. Does he even come out for the 5th?
No, absolutely not. No,
like he threw
this. They're saving him now. Like right, you put him in bubble wrap.
He threw 69 pitches on the 20th. He missed a start, had a sore arm. For whatever it's worth, La Russa said his bullpen was okay. It just seems like this is basically a glorified bullpen session where he probably throws 70 to 75 pitches.
All right. Anything else from this game?
White Sox are like the Astros and the Rays and the Jays and the Yankees and the Braves and all these other teams. They have a lot of good hitters. I'm not really looking to get to them against Gray, but they do have a high ceiling and virtually no ownership.
It might get
I guess to concisely say it, I guess in a way to make it sound like I'm not just like bullshitting my way around these teams. With all of the ownership going to Boston, all the ownership going to Minnesota, there's a pretty strong. This is a slate where I think I just kind of end up pretty spread out on a lot of offenses. So getting to teams like the White Sox makes sense if you're playing 150 lineups. It makes sense to have some Chicago if your strategy is basically how do I win this slate if the Red Sox fail. But if you're playing like single entry or 3 max and you're trying to narrow it down, the White Sox aren't a team that is going to be at the top for me.
All right, Cleveland, 4.6 implied runs here going up against Daniel Lynch. Zach Plesac on the mound here for Cleveland. Zach Plesac, I don't really know what to say about this dude. I mean, he's not that good, but 7,200 in this spot going up against a Royals team. Could we possibly click on him in large field stuff?
I just don't really see the reason. Kansas City doesn't strike out a lot. He doesn't have very good strikeout stuff. It's a price point too, where I typically think I either just like if I needed to go cheap, which I don't even think I'm really going to need to, I probably would just go further down, go to Walker, go to Pineda, go to Hearn and just open everything up. So yeah, I don't really see a whole lot of reason to get to Plesac.
All right, cool. And then Daniel Lynch, I have every single thought that we just said.
Yep. Same.
Cool. All right. So let's talk some bats because that's much more important here on this side. Miles Straw sucks. People keep playing Miles Straw. 26.1% hard hit percentage, 321 expected slugging. Yeah, he's fast. Yay, a lot of people are fast. Ahmed Rosario, I'd much rather start there with my Cleveland Indian builds and work my way up here, all the way up to Yu Chang. For sure, Austin Hedges, 3.1K. I'll throw him in the pool as well. 4.6 implied total, 74 degrees, 90% humidity there in Kansas City. What is your interest in Cleveland here?
I like both sides. I'm with you. Straw isn't that good. I'm still fine with playing him in stacks, though. He's 3% owned leading off against a pitcher in Lynch, who he's a good pitching prospect. He was really bad at the beginning of the year. He's turned it around a bit, but still overall this season, a 227 expected ISO to righties, 377 expected WOBA, 18% strikeout percentage. So I'm still fine with Straw, but I'm with you. Rosario, I think, is one of the better shortstop options. Ramirez and Reyes, love both of those guys if you can afford them. Harold Ramirez gives you plenty of value. Another cheap outfielder at 2,200. Yu Chang is fine. Even in the bottom of the order, Oscar Mercado hitting 9th, I think is fine at 2,600. He'll be low owned. So you have, as a whole, Cleveland projected for a decent amount of ownership right now. If you look at the top stack tool, 6.5% chance of being the top stack, 9.5% aggregate ownership. But that's a little bit deceiving because you have 16% going to Jose Ramirez. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have 13% going to Rosario, nothing wrong with that. And you have 15% going to Harold Ramirez, nothing really wrong with that. Franmil Reyes, 8%. Owen Miller is a 2K option. He's 8%, but Straw 3% leading off. You mentioned Chang. He's 2%. This is still a pretty easy team, the 5-man stack, and be contrarian.
Remember when Oscar Mercado was like good 2 years ago?
No, I remember he was supposed to be good.
He was in the 2-hole a lot, and it seemed, 15 batted balls over the course of 2019. And then last year, it was just such unbelievable garbage, like a lot of people were, but the K percentage is up to 29%. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for Oscar Mercado. That is wasting time here. Kansas City, talk to me about that.
Just a decent matchup against Plesac, another pitcher that I don't think is terrible, but in the context of this slate where a lot of really good offenses are facing a lot of really good pitchers, I'm just inclined to look to relatively low-owned teams like Kansas City that are facing middle-of-the-road type arms like Plesac. Kansas City, very similar to the Indians in that they are in the top stack tool, they're projected to go over-owned, but it's really that you have Salvador Perez pulling 13% because he homers every other time he comes to the plate. No one else on the team is projected for more than 5% ownership. This is another stack that, if you go to them as a 5-man, you have a pretty contrarian team. Plesac this year has allowed a 213 expected ISO to righties, 174 to lefties, sub 18% strikeout percentage to both sides of the plate. So Perez looks great. I like Benintendi. Santana's been terrible, but he is only 3K. Dozier's facing a guy that doesn't get strikeouts. That makes him a little bit more appealing always. So, it's Kansas City. They're not a great offense outside of Perez, but they're not getting a whole lot of ownership top to bottom, and it's a middle of the road matchup. So I like getting to them. Again, if your strategy is to just try and win the slate when Boston doesn't go nuts, Kansas City is one of the teams I'd be getting to.
Absolutely. Arizona, 3 total runs in this one. Meryl Kelly on the mound for them, going up against Alex Wood, who Alex Wood has a pretty low number on him. Looking at our top pitchers tool, it's still a guy that's kind of like middle of the road there, 7.6% ownership, or 7.9% ownership, 7.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. But this Arizona team is definitely one that we've been wanting to pick on up against lefties on the season. Arizona Diamondbacks, not very good, 21.4% K percentage. I wish that was more there, 98 WRC plus. So I guess they're kind of a middle of the road offense against lefties, but this is still not a good baseball team. What are we doing with Alex Wood in this spot?
Yeah, this is also a pretty bad lineup. The biggest issue for Wood is how many pitches is he going to throw? He's made 2 starts this month. He threw 37 pitches in 3 innings. Then he threw 61 in 4 innings. The good thing is, so unlike Carlos Rodon, where the White Sox are playing for absolutely nothing, the Giants would like to win games. They do need to get Wood stretched out for the postseason. I think it's relatively likely you get something like 75, 80 pitches from him. At 7,900, that's not going to make me super excited to roster him, but it does leave him in play. I think basically the field has it right here. 7.9% ownership, 7.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. It's a pretty good matchup. The Diamondbacks only have a 3-run implied total. My guess is you're getting around 75 pitches from Alex Wood. So yeah, kind of just neutral on him. I think he's playable. I don't think that it's likely you have to have him to win a tournament, though.
You playing any Meryl Kelly?
No, I'm not.
No, I didn't think you probably were. So there's at least a something named a Henry Ramos who's batting second here for Arizona, 2K. So we can look at something like that. Carson Kelly, 3.1K would probably be my favorite, other than Marte, who can just go yard in any matchup. But what are we kind of looking at from Arizona?
Not much of anything. You mentioned the cheap price tags. Carson Kelly's a reasonable catcher option. I assume he's going to be lower owned than Suzuki. Ramos is cheap, but there's plenty of those guys today. Just not a whole lot here. I mean, it's a maybe. Is it the lowest implied run total now, or it's tied with
3.
San Diego?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah, tied with San Diego. It's a bad park to hit in. There's enough other offenses today. Wood's not really pulling ownership, so I don't have a whole lot of interest in the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, so from one end of the spectrum to the other, San Francisco Giants, 201 ISO, best in the bigs, up against right-handed pitching on the season. And we don't have this lineup, but we know exactly what this lineup is going to look like. The Giants need to keep winning games. It's going to be their A team. What are we doing with the Giants?
Probably the way things look right now, my favorite stack in tournaments.
Awesome.
Meryl Kelly is another one of these middle-of-the-road pitchers that isn't terrible, but he's just, for this particular slate, he's one of the weaker pitchers. He doesn't miss bats, 22% strikeout percentage to righties, 17% to lefties this year, 150 expected ISO to lefties, 167 to righties. Kind of, similar to what I was saying about Miles Michaelis, but this Giants team just has so much power. He's going to let them put the ball in play because he doesn't have very good strikeout stuff. Going through this lineup, Lestella's got a 199 expected ISO this year. You have so many guys just, 200 plus or 175 plus, just top to bottom here. So I think that, and the pricing is reasonable. They're not cheap, but they're not super expensive. They're expensive enough to keep the ownership down, though. So the way things look right now, I absolutely love the Giants in tournaments.
Anything else from this game?
Nope.
All right, San Diego, Ryan Weathers. We're not going to be playing Ryan Weathers. That's hilarious. Max Scherzer, we're going to be playing him and these Dodger bats. What are we doing here with Max Scherzer?
I just expect to get a lot of him. Said it before, if you have popular bats, you can certainly pivot to Cole. You can pivot to some of these other guys, but I think Scherzer is the number one guy. Like, he's the SP1 in cash. On FanDuel, it might be tough to get to him at 11.5, but certainly would like to. On DraftKings, it's not going to be difficult at all at 10.4. So I think he looks good. You have a 3-run implied total for the Padres. Yes, they have a few dangerous hitters in their lineup, but Scherzer has just been excellent this year. Highest strikeout percentage on the slate, except Carlos Rodon, 34.8%, 3.18 xFIP, gave up 5 earned runs in cores in his last start. Prior to that, he had made 9 starts with the Dodgers, given up a total of 5 earned runs. I expect him to bounce back here and be a really strong option.
Hey, you could play Tatis. You could play Machado. I'm probably not going to play Machado or Tatis in this spot. How about you?
No, probably not.
Okay. And the Dodgers. Let's talk Dodgers, because this is just another high upside offense. One of the few totals we have over 5 here. I like getting to them pretty much every single time that they're going to go underrepresented. It doesn't look like they're going crazy underrepresented here in this spot, but it's basically flat leverage. But I'm going to be getting to some bats from this side. How about you?
Yeah, same here. And it's another team where Trey Turner is pulling 18%, Will Smith, the catcher, is pulling 11%. Next highest is Mookie Betts at 6%. The biggest issue I have with the Dodgers is the same one I was saying with the Blue Jays and with the Astros, where I don't know exactly how much I'm going to like the rest of my team if I 5-man stack the good Dodgers hitters. But, you can mix in some cheap bats from other teams potentially to, help the upside of your lineup. So I like the Dodgers here, just not sure exactly how easy it's going to be to get to them at their respective salaries. We did just get the Giants lineup. Wilmer Flores, 2,600 batting 6th, gives you another value bat in that lineup as well. No Tommy La Stella. So they have Donovan Solano at second base batting 8th. And then they have Flores at 2,600 as well.
Yeah. 1 through 5, the same. Wilmer Flores, nice deal. I just said, hey, we're not going to talk about it. We don't have time. We just talked about it. So well done by you. You run this ship, so I'm fine with it. Frankie Montas on the mound for Oakland here. We're going to round this one out. 3.7 implied runs for them, going up against Logan Gilbert. Two pitchers that are definitely jumping up, gaining a little bit more traction. Logan Gilbert, a little bit overrepresented, but I'm happy to be taking shots on him. How about yourself?
I don't mind it on Gilbert. I mean, he's got upside at his price point without a doubt. He has a 26% strikeout percentage this year. To me, though, the ownership's kind of there. When I first looked at this slate, I thought that it would be one where I was going to roll the dice on Gilbert at low ownership in a matchup that I hate against the Athletics. But it kind of seems like the field is there. And with the value bats that are on this slate, I don't think it's going to be that necessary for me to go down there. Like, I think in most lineups where I would play Logan Gilbert, I probably can play like Nathan Ivaldi or Max Fried or something like that and just get a pitcher that I think is a little bit better. So Gilbert's fine. I just kind of think the ownership's where it should be. On the other side, I am pretty interested in Montas. You have a good strikeout matchup against the Mariners. You have 6 left-handed or switch hitters in this lineup. Montas this year has just shy of a 30% strikeout percentage against lefties. He's thrown his splitter almost 31% of the time, up from about 18.5% last year. He's given up, a little bit of production, 162 expected ISO, 304 expected WOBA, but the 29% strikeout percentage is nice. You're also seeing the strikeout numbers against righties come up, which isn't surprising because that's been the case for his entire career. So I do like Montas at 9,400. Think that his ownership at 17% makes sense. So I think it's a pretty good spot.
And hitters here. Starling Marte hasn't played for the last 2 games. We could see him. We could not see him. I would like him to be in for the potential of the stack going off for sure. And they're going underrepresented. So put them in the bucket of a high upside offense in that event, but not going crazy for them. How about you?
Yeah, same here. I don't really have much in the way of hitting in this game.
Okay, well then that'll kind of do it for us here. All I know is that, man, 1 hour, 13 games for me, that's just godsend. So thank God you're here. I can't have Greg too mad at me here, but love it. Adam, any final words for the people on the way out?
Should be a pretty fun tournament slate. Just don't be afraid to take chances on high upside offenses than mediocre spots, because outside of the teams that are getting tons of ownership, there's not really many teams that are in like clearly good spots. So just, pay attention to the ceiling of your team more so than the medium projection.
Love it. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Jock Market. Absolutely flew through that one. We got MLB Live Before Lock. We got a bunch of coverage here leading you up for the next hour to that lock time. And then right after it, PGA Live Before Lock. I'm going to be on that with Ben Rasa talking a bunch of golf. So check out all the PGA DFS goodies we got for the Sanderson Farms. Excited to talk that. He's the man, Adam Scher over there. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm just a man. We'll catch you later.
the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock, sponsored by Jock Market, and we got some fun on the channel today. I'm here joined by T. McBee, Terry McBride. We're doing shows together on Wednesdays. Of course, we've got the chat is popping. We've got Sean V in there, who once again, I've been saying, if I have my way, Sean V is going to be my co-host on shows next year. We're going to get Eric Lindquist out of here, so that's really exciting. Also, if you guys want to see Sean V on shows next year, like the video. If you guys don't want to see Sean V on videos, also like the video. That's a very strong way to drive some engagements here. But other than that, Terry, we've got a bunch of games to talk about today. How you feeling about the slate overall?
I like this one. I tell you what, I think there's a lot of interesting pitching. I mean, we start out with pitching every slate, and sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's just ugly, and there's a couple clear-cut guys. But this one, there's a couple top-end ace-type, caliber-type guys, but there's a pretty interesting mid-range in this slate that, I think you can spread out to some decent options, a lot of which look kind of the same. I think there's chalk on some weird spots that I don't agree with necessarily. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
I'm gonna wager a guess here. I'm looking over at the pitcher ownership, and I'm going to say the number one spot that Terry McBride does not agree with when it comes to pitcher ownership is Taiwan Walker. Is that correct?
Hey, now, you got that one. You hit that on the head. Yeah, I don't really get that one at all, just based on what we've seen out of Taiwan in the second half. And, we'll get into it if you don't want to get into it right now. But, yeah, that was the one, absolutely.
No, I mean, we could start right there because, he is the overall chalk at the pitcher position. DK, there's a couple of chalk pitchers, but kind of spread out ownership other than just two guys over 30% on. That is Taiwan Walker on the low end at 6,600. It's certainly the matchup is appealing. And then we've got Max Scherzer on the high end, project for 35.8% ownership over on FanDuel. By far, Taiwan Walker is the most popular play at the pitcher position, 25% projected ownership. So we usually start at the top end of the pitcher, but since it's kind of the lead, and I have no issue, we could start by talking about Taiwan Walker and some of the merits and maybe not as much merits of playing in the pitcher today.
Yeah, so for me, I wrote up a little section on him in my tournament strategy article because I thought it was important to talk about. For the first half of the season, if we're going by FanGraphs split for first half, second half, right? So the first half of the season, he threw 94 and 2/3 innings. Second half, 57 innings. First half, a 2.66 ERA with a 3.93 xFIP. Second half, a 7.74 ERA with a 5.37 xFIP. That's not good. His strikeouts fell from 25% in the first half to 18.5% over the second half. His walks jumped from 7.9% to 8.8%. That's how you end up giving up a lot more earned runs. I just think he's way too popular despite the price, despite the fact that he's going up against the Marlins active roster with a 134 ISO, a 2.81% home run rate that creates runs 20% worse than average and strikes out at a 25.5% rate against righties. I just don't think it's there for this guy. He's been a roller coaster all season. At best, when he's doing well, he's a league average type pitcher. And he's been pitching below league average for the last 50 and change innings that we've seen out of him. I don't know if he's hiding an injury. I don't know if he's just not the pitcher that he was in the first half, wore down over the course of the season, whatever it might be. I'm just not there. And I'm happy to let the field have Taiwan Walker on this one. Price, I think he makes more sense on the DK slate, but price notwithstanding, I'm pretty much off of Taiwan Walker on this one.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you and I have done shows where Taiwan Walker has been a pitcher we've talked about. I have not been on Taiwan Walker for a considerable amount of time, and that's also been my assumption is that he's been pitching with an injury where you consider Taiwan Walker. We got off to a terrific start this year, but really the turning point in the season for him was he was dealing with a back injury. The Mets didn't let him swing the bat, and he just had these weird plate appearances where pitchers are throwing like 89 mile per hour fastballs right down the middle because he knew what was up. And then the Mets were like, all right, we're going to have you bet left-handed now instead of right-handed, but he still was only taking pitches. Occasionally was bunting. It was very bizarre. And it came out, he had a back injury. They're trying to limit him. If you look at his recent fantasy performances, -10 fantasy points against Boston, whatever, that's reasonable. But overall, it's just there's so few fantasy outings here that are good. The last time he scored over 15 fantasy points, a very bizarre matchup to do it against, but it was August 14th against the Dodgers. But that aside, we're looking at, a month and a half since this guy had a serviceable fantasy performance. Then to find the next one before then that he scored over 15 fantasy points, you have to go back to, by the way, another weird one to do it in. This is July 3rd against the Yankees. So you look at the last 3 months, this guy's had 2 games rated over 15 fantasy points, bizarrely come against 2 of the best offense in baseball, the Yankees and Dodgers. But by and large part, he hasn't pitched well this year. And there's been times he was chalk in really favorable spots, and he just sucked. We saw against the Washington Nationals, he was a popular play and scoring 4 fantasy points, did up 6 runs in 4 1/3 innings. Another start against the Marlins, where it was also really popular at a kind of cheap price point. Pitches 5 2/3 innings, gives up 4 earned runs. He just hasn't been very good this year. And in general, if there's a not great player that's going to be popular, I'd rather be on the other side of the game. And for sure, I understand price point people are getting there, but it's just too much ownership for me. In cash games, fair enough on DK, play Taiwan Walker for cheap if you absolutely need to save salary. But if we look at the high end, I think Max Scherzer is warranted as a chalk play today. Taiwan Walker at the cheap end, there's just other guys I'd rather go to.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. And honestly, it's kind of leading me to at least glancing at some of these Marlins bats. I know it's a terrible team for all the reasons I read off a few minutes ago, but we've talked about them a few times where they do have a couple interesting individual players. They just don't really string together well as a lineup. So like Jesus Sanchez batting 4th in this lineup, I'm extremely interested in for 3,000 on FanDuel, 3,300 on DK is even more compelling. 12.3% barrel rate for the kid, 42.5% hard hit percentage over his first 245 plate appearances. He's at 14 home runs, has a 244 ISO. After him, Lewin Diaz, only 108 plate appearances, 8 home runs already, a 272 ISO, 12% barrel rate, only 36% hard contact. Those don't really go together. There's a ton of strikeouts here. These guys strike out aggressively, those two guys included. But if you put those guys together with Jazz Chisholm and then pick one of Miguel Rojas, Brian De La Cruz, Lewis Brinson, I think you're okay. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad stack. You're not spending any money. Now you can look to guys like Gerrit Cole and Max Scherzer, or one of these other, like Gerrit Cole, Nathan Ivaldi, Max Scherzer, Nathan Ivaldi, something like that, and have a decent amount of money left over to spend on your other stack while attacking 40% of the field on DK, 25% of the field on FanDuel. It's not a great bet, but I think there's at least a couple interesting guys at no ownership whatsoever and no cost at the top of that lineup. So it's actually leading me in that direction a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Not in a big way, and we'll talk about stacks later. But 13 games, I don't think we have to get there. But I do like a little bit of the leverage they offer off of very popular Taiwan Walker. But I mentioned the other really popular pitcher of the day on DraftKings is going to be Max Scherzer. There's nobody really that cheap. That popular on FanDuel outside of Walker. You got 24.6% ownership going towards him. The next most rostered pitcher is Max Scherzer at 16%, which is warranted to me. Then over on DraftKings, I think the 35.8% ownership on Scherzer is also warranted. How do you feel about Scherzer as a pay up option? Do you think that he's rightful chalk relative to the other high end plays today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Padres, we've railed on them a couple times recently where they're just not as good as everybody expected, and they haven't been over the course of the season. 163 ISO, a 3.45% home run rate against righties. They only create runs 1% ahead of average, so they're very league average-ish kind of offense. They do limit strikeouts really well against righties. 20.8% strikeout rate, one of the better marks in the league. But this is Max Scherzer we're talking about, so I'm not really worried about the limiting the strikeouts. He can strike anybody out. So over the course of the season, and a 0.83 whip for Scherzer, walking 5.4% of hitters, 16.1% induced swinging strike rate, a 31.6% CSW. He's just terrific. Limits hard hits to 32.7%. His expected slugging percentage is a 72nd percentile mark, 338, but he's got a 256 xWOBA, which is 92nd in baseball. I mean, there's everything to like about Max Scherzer. I could have just limited all of that to it's Max Scherzer. He's going up against a mediocre team. Just play him. But here we are. So yeah, I would happily roster Scherzer here. The only thing you can quibble with is maybe there's a better way to spend some of the salary with, if you pay down to Gerrit Cole, or you're really sacrificing that much upside in that spot. I think that it's a more dangerous lineup that you're going into, but I think the upside is similar there. So if you need the savings, I don't mind like the similarity of the upside of those plays. So I'm definitely bullish on Max, but I think it's, it isn't the only direction to go. Let's put it that way.
So let's talk about some of those pivot options then to Max Scherzer, who I think the names we're really talking about here in terms of the high end. We're talking about pitchers that are priced, 10K plus. We've got Carlos Rodon and Gerrit Cole today over on FanDuel, and same case on DK also. There's only 3 pitchers today that are priced over 10,000 on DK, and that is Gerrit Cole, Carlos Rodon, Max Scherzer. How viable of pivots do you see Rodon and Cole as off of Scherzer? Because one thing that kind of stands out to me is all these other pitchers, relatively accurate ownership in our top pitchers tool. So I find it fine to mix these guys in, but I'm still just going to be with Scherzer riding mostly as my SP1 here. Is there anybody here that you do really gravitate towards as a pivot?
It would be Cole, the natural one for me. I just think there's so much upside in him every single start. He's one of the just cross the opponent off and start the ace kind of pitchers for me. And Scherzer's very much in that camp as well. And Scherzer has the better matchup. So I prefer the Scherzer play, but for a little bit less, like I was saying, if you need to save a couple $100, I don't see the upside all that differently. They're both going up against teams that limit strikeouts pretty well. The Blue Jays in the split, I think I have it here. It's not on that one, but bear with me as I'm pulling it up over here. But I mean, Cole's fantastic. We all know that. But the Blue Jays, 19.9% strikeout rate against righties. So that's the best in baseball right now. So they're very, very good at limiting strikeouts. They've got plenty of power. They've got a 4.66% home run rate, a 113 WRC plus, a 198 ISO. So they create runs well above average. They've got plenty of power. We all know that about this lineup, but it's Garrett Cole. So I'm happy to take a shot on Garrett Cole. 33.9% strikeout rate on the season, 288 xFIP, a 104 whip, 14.7% induced swinging strike rate. We all know about the contact. Every now and again, when somebody manages to make contact with him, they're going to send one deep, and there's plenty of power on the other side here. 38.2% hard hit, 9.3% power rate. But it's Garrett Cole, and he's on at least on the FanDuel slate, he's coming up under owned. He's a little bit negatively leveraged on the DK slate, but we're talking about like 18% ownership, somewhere around there. So it's roughly efficient type ownership on him. So I'm happy to make that pivot where I need to. If I need to pick up a little savings, Carlos Rodon isn't even in my player pool. I don't expect more than 3 or 4 innings out of him. If we get 5, and he strikes out 10, then I lose. I'm happy to concede that.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you with Carlos Rodon, to where I really like Rodon as a pitcher. In fact, I think Carlos Rodon is the best pitcher in the American League this year. However, he just hasn't needed to pitch. He hasn't needed to pitch very much in the second half of the year. The White Sox had this, and this is also a talking point I've brought up a lot when it's been Carlos Rodon or Lance Lynn starts over the last couple of months. The White Sox have had nothing to play for a meaningful amount of time. And as a result, we just saw these pitchers kind of limited / shut down in the second half of the season. So recent outings for Carlos Rodon, 3 innings last time out against the Tigers, 5 innings, 5 innings, 5 innings, 5 innings. The last time he pitched more than 5 innings in the start was July 18th against the Astros. And it's not because he was actually, they put him on the injured list. They gave him extra time off in between starts. He's not hurt. His velocity is fine. His spin rate is fine. They just didn't need to pitch their best pitcher. And due to some injury issues he's had in the past, I think they just kind of felt like, hey, let's give this guy a little bit of a rest. Let's give Lance Lynn a little bit of a rest. We're playing for the playoffs here, and they just didn't have to. So, yeah, I agree with you, Carlos Rodon. I think that we might be a little bit high in our projections on him because I don't think we're going to really get that length out of him, especially on FanDuel. I think it's very unlikely we get 6 innings out of him. The inability to get the quality start, that's a big issue to me. So I'm going to be looking to go elsewhere. In terms of that next tier of starting pitchers, we've got a bunch of guys in. We've got Frankie Montas has become a popular talking point in the chat. Sean V has already said no chance he's going to play Frankie Montas today. We've got Nathan Ivaldi. He's in that same price range. We've also got Aaron Nola, Jose Berrios, Max Fried, Luis Garcia. Is there anybody in this like mid 8K range to up to the high 9K range that you're getting to overweight to the field?
It's coming up a lot of somewhat even ownership across that range of the field. I think they're all pretty well priced. I think they're all in reasonable matchups, at least a couple better than others. Like Ivaldi's in a much better matchup against the Orioles, where you get Frankie Montas up against the Mariners. You get Berrios facing the Yankees. Obviously, there's a ton of strikeout upside in going up against the Yankees, but we know about the Yankees' power. Nola, I trust Aaron Nola for the most part, and I never really worry about throwing him into a bad matchup. But at Atlanta against that Braves lineup, I don't love that spot. And since he's not coming up under owned, since he's effectively at the right price, I don't really like that spot for Nola. So he'd be one that I'd be maybe undercutting a little bit and getting away from. And then looking to shares of, I think Logan Gilbert could be interesting for a little bit less on the other side of that game. That's getting down into the other tier. Who is the other guy? Luis Garcia and Max Fried. Fried, I think, could be interesting on the other side of the Phillies game. And then Garcia for 9,200 going up against Tampa with nobody whatsoever on him. He's had a really good year. He's been pitching great all season long. It's a bad matchup. They're very good. It's one of the better lineups in baseball. I think that's an okay price for him, though. And if less than 1% of the field is going to be on him, I'm kind of interested. So I think that's an interesting spot there.
Yeah, it's once again, I'm really finding here, like my overall take at pitcher is I'm fine with the ownership on Max Scherzer. I think that Taiwan Walker's picking up too much ownership. Then there's just a bunch of guys in here: Garrett Cole, Frankie Montas, Nathan Eovaldi. I want to have like 20% exposure to these guys. And there's just no spot where I'm like, this guy looks crazy under anything like that. A lot of these guys just kind of look appropriately owned. And I want to be somewhere around the field. There is one guy, though, that I do think looks egregiously underowned. And it's not that it's the best spot in the world, but Sonny Gray is going up against Chicago White Sox. And there is very limited ownership here going to Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray is sub 1% owned today on DraftKings. FanDuel, less necessary of a play. We only have to roster one pitcher, and I think he kind of becomes a thin play at that point. But when I'm really trying to look at who is the low-owned pitcher that I think has significant upside here, it's going to be Sonny Gray at sub 1% owned. I just think that everybody else is really appropriately priced, and I'm struggling to find guys that I want to leverage myself with. Sonny Gray at under 1%, does that move the needle for you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a little bit ranked down the board here, and I just honestly didn't get to him, and it's the same in my FanDuel projections where I'm not probably going to get to too much of him on the blue site where we only need one, and he's like in the middle of my board for what isn't a great matchup, everything that you were just describing. But yeah, with nobody going there on DK at 8,700, I think it makes sense to throw at least some shares of him into the mix. 26.9% strikeout rate over the course of the season, 3.64 xFIP, induces a 10.5% swinging strike rate, 30.1% CSW. He still puts too many guys on base with the walks. He's got a 1.21 whip, a 8.7% walk rate, but he's really good at limiting power. 4.3% barrel ball rate, 31.2% hard hit, 86.5 mile an hour average exit velo on an 8.7 degree average launch angle. Even against a really good home run hitting team like this, that's enough to kind of cap the upside overall. Maybe they get to him with a few sequential hitting opportunities. Maybe they get to him for some run creation. But the idea that they're going to come out and like light him up, I don't think is necessarily viable. It might be enough to limit his upside for our purposes here. But with nobody on him at that price, yeah, I think that's an underprice, and I think he's underowned.
Yeah, and once again, I'm not looking at Sonny Gray as like, oh, I need to get 20, 30% of this guy. I'm just thinking of him as a guy is totally unowned. I want him in 10% of my lineups, and 10% of Sonny Gray, that's going to get me 10x the field on him. He's sub 1% owned right now. So that's really what I'm looking at. If you're building, here's where I think he's best utilized. If you're building a really chalky stack today, like let's say you really like the Boston Red Sox today. The Red Sox are going to be, a somewhat popular, more than somewhat popular team on DraftKings today. They're projected for 21.3% ownership. Maybe you're looking at Boston saying, no, I don't care what the ownership is. I want to play this team. Maybe that's where you differentiate a pitcher and go to a Sonny Gray. That's where I think he really has utility on this slate, because otherwise the pitchers look, about appropriately owned. But let's get into some of the cheap options then, because we talked about all the ownership going to Taiwan Walker. A good spot for him, but he's generally been a bad pitcher today. With neither of us think he warrants as much ownership as he's getting. Who are the guys in the cheap pricing range that you are looking to get to as pivots off of Walker?
So I'm just looking through some of those prices. While I look at prices, actually, now just to round off that point about Sonny Gray, I'm kind of curious now, just based on that final piece that you were throwing in there, like taking a look at our top pitchers board with Jose Barrios, right? 11% probability of being in the top two value, 3.7%, ownership around, top value 5.5, ownership around 5% overall. Sonny Gray, 6.4% chance of being in the top two, but the 0.5 ownership for 200 less. Is that where you're looking to make that pivot? Because like that's the pitcher that's immediately in that price range. Otherwise, you're talking about guys that are like 2,000 more. Similar story with like Frankie Montas from a similar kind of range from Barrios. Are those the guys that you're saying like, hey, I'm just going to turn to Sonny Gray in like 10% of those shares?
Yeah, and once again, like I was saying before, it's not that I'm massively confident in Sonny Gray in this spot. Just, hey, here's a good pitcher with strikeout upside that nobody's rostering, and everybody's kind of rostering everybody else. Like, we're having people in the chat debate the merits of guys like Frankie Montas and really just Frankie Montas right now because Sean V has planted his flag in not liking Frankie Montas. And we know that he becomes a lightning rod for comments in the YouTube section. And I don't have a strong take on Frankie Montas. I'm not going to agree or disagree with Sean V. We've got Frankie Montas is projected for 16% ownership on DK with a 14.5% chance to be a top two pitcher. I'm not taking either side here. He's just kind of a neutral play to me. I think he's a guy to get to, but not really any differently than the field. And then there are some of these guys, I really don't love Jose Barrios' matchup against the Yankees, but if you get to a couple lineups, and it's not the end of the world. But the one guy I really look at is wanting to be overweight to is Sonny Gray, just because it's so easy to get overweight to a guy who's sub 1% owned.
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought that was interesting with how he ranks out to those other guys that are in that like price tier. It's not one that would be immediately apparent, I don't think, to the casual user of the top pitchers tool. So I think it's worth talking those differences out when we find them like that. So as going back to your question on some of the value guys, I think Alex Wood is getting pretty under-owned on both sites. 7,900 on DK at 7. He's pulling less than 10% ownership up against the Diamondbacks. 25.9% strikeout rate over the course of the season, 6.9% walks, 12.4% induced swinging strike rate, 5.5% barrel rate. 55% would be pretty bad. 41% hard hit rate on the season. So the hard hits are bad, but the barrel's fine. The launch angle's fine. Decent strikeout rate. Doesn't put too many guys on base. Going up against the Diamondbacks team that, as of last touch, they're a little bit better against lefties. And that holds true. 169 ISO. Crete runs 3% better than average, but only a 2.99% home run rate, one of the worst in the league. They only strike out 21.1% of the time, but this is the Diamondbacks we're talking about up against a good pitcher. I kind of see it for price. I don't really get why there's not more of the field on this spot.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, well, here's the main reason. Everybody who's rostering a cheap pitcher today is going to Taiwan Walker, at least according to our ownership projections right now. So when you have a cheap pitcher that's going to be in, let's see, what is the refreshed ownership? What is the most recent run we have on? Yeah, Taiwan Walker now, the most popular pitcher on DraftKings, projected for 39% ownership. When that many people are rostering a pitcher in that price point, there's only so much spots in lineups for other guys. So that's something that's really driving the ownership down for everybody else. So to me, I'm actually looking the other side of this game, though. Eliezer Hernandez, who is picking up such a limited amount of ownership today. And also a pitcher who I don't think Hernandez is a bad pitcher whatsoever. I think he's got good stuff. There's a little bit of strikeout upside to him. If you look at his numbers this year, strikeout rate down a little bit from last year, but it's still fine. 22.9% overall. Last year, he struck out 32.1% of the hitters he faced. And if you look at his zips and schema projections, they have him projected as a pitcher who's, maybe going to struggle at times in terms of allowing runs, but strikeout rate, both of those projection sites have him being a fairly high strikeout pitcher. And there's another reason to like Eliezer Hernandez here also. In the event that Taiwan Walker pitches poorly, Hernandez is more likely to pick up the win. And that's not something that offers a ton of leverage in DFS, but it's a few fantasy points to be found there that you're also gaining over the field. So Eliezer Hernandez, considering how low owned he's projected to be, considering that we do have him also projected to be positively leveraged with a better chance of success than what his ownership is, I really like him when you also consider the slight amount of leverage we're getting there off Walker. So that's actually my preferred pivot option in the cheap end of the pricing range.
That was my number 2. So we're right there. I liked Wood a little bit better. Just taking a look at the matchup, and I agree. I think Hernandez is probably a little bit better than we've seen this year with the 22.9% strikeout rate, the 4.47 xFIP. I think there's a little bit more upside there for him in general, but he projects out well for me in my model. He's not expensive. There's nobody on him whatsoever on either site. So he's very easy to get to. You're throwing him up against a Mets team that is super average against both hands. Against righties, 24.5% strikeout rate is actually below average. A 159 team ISO, slightly below average. 3.66% home run rate is like right in the middle of the league, and they create runs 3% worse than average. There's not a ton to fear from this Mets team. I will say that I do get good home run marks on this Mets team, though, on the other side. Pete Alonso actually pulling one of the higher home run marks in my home run model. I'm not entirely sure what's driving it. I guess Hernandez probably has given up a few additional long balls that might just be pulling it in from the raw data rather than some of the hard hit. Yeah, it looks like 12 home runs in 46 and 2/3 innings so far this season. That's a 2.31 home run per 9. So that's skewing the model a little bit. He's only made 10 starts this season. And that said, it's not driving it into like the stratosphere. So I'm pretty confident in that at least we get a decent start out of Hernandez here for the price.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And then also consider 3.3% projected ownership to a 7.1% chance to be a top pitcher over on DK. FanDuel becomes, once again, a little bit thinner of a play on a single pitcher site. But even with that said, it's 7,100. We do have him being slightly underowned. And FanDuel, there's a little bit more leverage to be gained on a single pitcher site where the win bonus becomes also a little bit more important in FanDuel scoring. But anybody else you're looking at the pricing, this is probably more of a DraftKings relevant question than FanDuel, because I don't think there's a real need to go super cheap a pitcher on FanDuel. But any of the super cheap pitchers on DK stand out to you at all? We've got guys like Taylor Hearn is projecting for very limited ownership, and then also with a fairly decent chance to be a top value pitcher. We've got Taylor Hearn, at least if you're really looking to pump the pitcher, something that would make him stand out a little bit is 22.6% chance to be a top 2 value pitcher on the slate. I think Taylor Hearn is terrible, but the matchup against the Angels is kind of favorable. So anything that you like about him or any other cheap pitchers on DK?
Well, the probability of being a top two is higher than his 21.4% strikeout rate on the season. 99 innings of pretty unimpressive baseball out of Hearn this year. But yeah, if you're only paying 5,100, I really don't care that much about the pitcher numbers. You're basically, he's at a hitter price here. So you're only looking for a limited amount of upside. The Angels, obviously not a very good lineup at this point in the season outside of a couple specific hitters. I don't love recommending guys like this just because of how badly he's pitched throughout the course of the season. You're talking about a guy with a 4.76 xFIP, a 1.32 WHIP, 27.3% CSW percentage. Hard hit is average-ish, 38.8% hard hit. I don't love it. And then you're going up against, even with their flaws, that Angels lineup, 4.05% home run rate, create runs just 1% below average against lefties, 22.7% strikeout rate is around the average against lefties, 173 team ISO, a little above average against lefties. I don't love it, but I agree that the value is there and it's fine to, it could be me up there for that price and it wouldn't make that much of a difference. I like him better than Ryan Weathers, who I don't think is going to pitch that much. I like him better than Jansen Junk. I like him better than I think Daniel Lynch or Miles Mikolas. I'll give you that much.
Yeah. And if I have to punt with one of these guys, it's going to be Taylor Hearn. It's mostly just because of the matchup. The same reason yesterday, my favorite cheap pitching option was actually AJ Alexy. And it's not because I think AJ Alexy is good. It's because I have such a disrespect for this Angels lineup as a whole. That it was just a cheap pitcher going up against them. So I prefer Taylor Hearn to the Angels lineup. But also, we've got a celebrity in the YouTube chat. This is the Sham Wow guy who got a good bounce back from last I saw the Sham Wow guy. I believe he was arrested for beating up a hooker in Miami or something like that. But Sham Wow guy, he's on the mend and he's in the YouTube chat playing MLB DFS. So that's all well and good, but
chose to have his coming back party here in our live stream. I love it. Welcome
I'm sure he cleaned up he cleaned up the mess with the Sham Wow. Look, wow,
there you go.
He's back in action.
Love it. As long as he doesn't bring the My Pillow guy around, I'm good.
That's the mattress guy who places the crazy baseball bets. But any other pitchers you want to bring up here before we head over to the offenses?
I was just looking at Mikey Pineda's game log. Doesn't look like he's been pitching deep into games, a lot of 2s, 3s, 4s here. So I don't think he's that relevant, but 5 innings, 5 2/3, 5 innings the last couple times out, doesn't strike that many people out anymore. Hasn't been giving up a ton of runs, going up against the Detroit Tigers with some bonus strikeouts on the table. That would be like scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'm not going to make the play, but I think for price, he's at least in that kind of a price mix. So no real ownership going to him. But again, we're talking about a guy 19.2% strikeout rate on the season. The xFIP is a little bit better than Hearn at 4.34. He has only walked 4.8% of hitters, kind of a non-Pineda like number if memory serves. But there's not a ton to see here. It's just kind of about the price and the matchup there, at least worth throwing into the mix.
Yeah, with Pineda, I've just been so anti-Pineda for the entire season. There's just so many red flags with them, and also he ended up not having that good of a season overall. Also, I think the upside is pretty capped there. So for me, at 6,100, the matchup is well and good enough at home against Detroit. I'd rather go to Taylor Hearn, but that's also, it's not saying much. We're talking about guys who it's I'd rather play 5% of Taylor Hearn than 5% of Michael Pineda. Neither of them are important options here. But what is important, Terry, is that today's show is sponsored by JockMark. And if you guys are unfamiliar with JockMark, you download the app and make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo, and you can get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. That is using the promo code Awesemo over at JockMarket. JockMarket, different way to play daily fantasy sports, really looking at athletes kind of like their stocks in the stock market. So really fun, different way to play daily fantasy sports. Once again, that is promo code Awesemo, and you're making your first deposit. So let's head on over to the stacks now, and let's talk about the chalk here, where we've got the Boston Red Sox, and I'm refreshing this to make sure I'm looking at the most recent ownership. I assume that nothing's changed too much. The Red Sox, I assume, 18.8% projected ownership over on FanDuel, over 20% on DK. So, Terry, how are you going to handle the massive amount of chalk going to Boston after they disappointed in a spot against the Orioles, where also everybody was on them yesterday?
Look, I mean, it's the Red Sox. They're clearly one of the best teams in baseball, trailing my Yankees by 2 games for the wild card, but locked into the second wild card spot, half a game up on Seattle. They should have no problems whatsoever locking that down. They're clearly going to score like 10, 15 runs tonight, win this game handily. No question about it whatsoever in my mind. I think everybody out there should be very confident in that. Obviously, I'm trying to put a little bit of a reverse jinx on the Red Sox here. They're way too owned. That's for DFS purposes. They are probably going to win this game. They are probably going to destroy Zach Lother. There's nothing really to like about him as a pitcher right now. 5.12 xFIP, 11.1% walk rate, 22.2% strikeouts, 51.4% hard hit percentage. You can't throw that up against this Red Sox team. So they're very likely to tattoo this kid and get up in this game pretty quickly and put it away. But there's just way too much ownership. You're talking about 25% plus for all of the good hitters. If you want to get away with a low-owned Alex Verdugo to make your day at the end of the lineup going up against lefty, then that's your guy who's going to be owned under the 10% rate. Everybody else, just significant ownership. If you can figure out ways to put them together with lesser owned stacks, like offsetting some of the salary and the popularity with the Marlins, and then putting that together with lesser owned pitchers, then maybe you can get there. Maybe you can get unique, but they're just so difficult to build with. And there's no forgiveness in their prices really either.
Yeah, and the other thing also is if you look through for a slate this size, you could find some hitters where there's some reduced ownership. Really not the case today on DraftKings, where the only player in the lineup that's less than 10% owned right now is Alex Verdugo, and that's at 8.8%. And I don't have an issue playing Verdugo at all. I have him in 5% of lineups in my build right now, but that's still underweight to the field. And then every other player, once again, I'm getting to a lot of these guys at like 10%, but that's still well under where the field has them in. So Hunter Renfroe, 24% projected ownership. Kike Hernandez, Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, JD Martinez, every single one of these guys are projected for over 20% ownership. Once again, they're in my player pool. I have them around 10% for most of these guys, but it's just not as much exposure as the field. So I don't have an issue with the Red Sox as a stack over the course of 150 lineups, but I just recommend being underweight to the field on them. And the same goes for a team like the, let's see, where's the ownership at now for the Minnesota Twins, where the Minnesota Twins, well, actually, here's where the Minnesota Twins are different from the Boston Red Sox. The Minnesota Twins are picking up a ton of ownership to the point where I don't think they're worth having in the player pool at all. So Minnesota Twins today, 16% projected ownership compared to a 6% chance to be a top stack over on DK. Over on FanDuel, the Minnesota Twins, 17% projected ownership with a 6% chance to be a top stack. They're in the mix as one of the better teams in terms of odds to be a top scoring team, but we've got the Dodgers, the Indians, the Giants, the Astros, the Angels, the Royals. All these teams are 4 to 6% odds being a top scoring team on the slate, but the Minnesota Twins ownership just dwarfs them, and I'm not sure I really understand why.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we're searching for why, it's probably Casey Mize on the mound on the other side of this one. I would think that's probably what the field's attacking there, but I agree with you. I'm much happier to get to low-owned opportunities around what I think are better baseball teams, better lineups, and better lineups for DFS purposes, to be honest. The Twins look like they're in a good spot. They're drawing nice home run marks, as you would expect, going up against Mize. 19.2% strikeout rate for him on the season, a 4.39 xFIP, 10% barrel rate, 39.9% hard hit. Plenty to like there for home run upside, for sequential hitting, getting on base, creating runs. But this is another team where all these guys are owned in the mid to high teens on the DK slate, into the 20s for the most part on the FanDuel slate, at least around most of the hitters that you'd want to get to. I think if you're looking for individuals, Miguel Sano is somewhat interesting at only around 11% ownership on DK for 3,800. You can get away with that. The middle of the lineup isn't egregiously bad. Like if you wanted to do a 3-man Donaldson, Kepler, Sano on DK for 45, 39, and 38, you're playing with 2 14% owned guys and an 11%. I'll just give it away. I think that's reasonable enough as long as you're not stacking them with the Red Sox and the 2 most owned pitchers. Like don't put those 3 guys with the Red Sox and with Taiwan Walker, because 300 other people are doing that. But if you're taking those guys, leave Byron Buxton on the table. Like, make some choices around the individual ownership. I think you can get away with it, but it's still not my favorite. I'd just rather get to the lower owned, better teams.
And by the way, just because we haven't really discussed it, but Tim Anderson will not be playing for the White Sox today. He was suspended for 3 regular season.
He's appealing. He's appealing.
Oh, he is. He's appealing. I thought that he was. All right, I
was going to bring that up. Yeah, it's an important note at the very end of that tweet that he's appealing and he's still going to play.
Okay, so what are we doing here? Why we got these These tweets.
Unless they changed. Did they announce a changed lineup that I didn't see? Because the tweet that I read said he's still in.
No, all right. So he's suspended, but he's playing. Who gives a care? Doesn't matter for us. But here's what people should care about. We talked about stacks we think are a little bit overowned here in the Minnesota Twins. Minnesota Twins very overowned. Boston Red Sox a little overowned as well. But Terry, who is your number one favorite stack of the day? Which team are you getting to at the highest clip?
I tell you what, I wrote them up this afternoon and not much has changed. I really like the spot for the San Francisco Giants. I think Adam was saying on the way out that it was one of his favorite stacks as well. They were my featured stack of the day. I think it's a good spot. They're going up against Meryl Kelly, who's league average-ish at best, 19.6% strikeout rate, a 4.21 xFIP over 153 innings. He's a guy who, we've maybe thought a little bit too much of over the course of his short career so far. Maybe he's a little bit better than he's been this year, but I just don't think there's a ton there. 9% swinging strike rate, a 26.3% CSW is well below average, a 1.29 whip. So against one of the best lineups in baseball, a 4.55 home run rate, a 2.04 ISO against righties this season, 13% better than league average creating runs. Those numbers rival what we see out of the Red Sox in splits, and they're getting owned just way less. So I think for a somewhat similar matchup, for a somewhat similar team, it's a pretty good opportunity to get to those Giants bats. I really like that spot. I think they're going under-owned, and they're not that difficult to afford. You can get to them fairly easily. A lot of quality just up and down the lineup.
Yeah, I love that call for sure. They're one of the most positive leverage teams in our top stacks tool. And once again, a team that's just really not picking up much ownership. There's upside. It's a good matchup for them against Meryl Kelly. Price tags are reasonable. We've got Crawford, Brian, Posey. Those guys are a little on the pricey end, but it's nothing egregious, and it's easy enough to stack them with other guys who are cheap and basically unowned. So I'm totally behind the San Francisco Giants as well. But another team that I like quite a bit today, a team that I liked a lot yesterday, going right back to the well, the New York Yankees going up against Jose Berrios, who it's less than 1% ownership for the Yankees. Yet again, similar situation as yesterday, where they're going up against a good pitcher on paper in Jose Berrios, but he's a pitcher with a little bit of variance to him. And the Yankees offense has so much firepower to it that I just don't think they ever warrant being this low owned. There's not a single, the only player in the Yankees lineup today, I was going to say not a single player with more than 1% ownership, but that would be untrue because Joey Gallo is projected for 2% ownership. But that aside, it's just an unowned team with this much upside in a spot where the Yankees fighting for playoff spots. So they got that full lineup out there. Jose Berrios, who, he's pitched better as of late, but it's not like Jose Berrios has been some totally foolproof pitcher throughout his career. We've seen spots where he's gotten hit a little bit. And this Yankees lineup is, so strong that I just don't think there's ever a spot where it's warranted for them to be under 1% owned. So I went with the Yankees last night as my favorite low owned stack against Hyun-Jin Ryu. And I'm going right back to the well today against Jose Berrios because the Yankees are unowned today, and the price points aren't really correct on DraftKings either, where we have this team, the salaries across the board. We've got Stanton's at 5,000. That's not problematic to me. You got Judge a little pricey at 5,500, but the rest of this lineup, LeMahieu 4,200, Gleyber Torres 43, Gallo 44, Rizzo 46. These are cheap price points for a lot of guys that are elite hitters, especially for fantasy purposes. So the Yankees, I know maybe a little bit of bias here with you, Terry, but how do you like them as a contrarian team?
Obviously, just cue the Jose Berrios complete game shutout here, 10 strikeouts, and Yanks lose a game in the playoff standings. I think it's a great call. They're way too under-owned. They're one of the teams we've talked about all season long with the Astros, the Blue Jays, the White Sox, other teams like that, where a team loaded with superstars, an all-star team up and down, and they're going under-owned. It's just always going to be a good opportunity. And Berrios is good. He's a talented guy, 26% strikeout rate on the season, doesn't walk too many guys at 5.9%, a 1.08 whip. There's plenty to like about Berrios, but he's not one of these absolute lights out Max Scherzer type starters either. He's certainly gettable. And the Yanks, for all their flaws with the strikeouts, have a great ability to get on base. They have a good ability to create runs. They have titanic power. There's every reason to like them for DFS purposes. Even if you hate the Yankees, even if you think they're going to go up there and strike out 12 times tonight, they still might hit 4 home runs and score 12 runs in the process. So it's just that kind of team. So you just kind of got to ride it. I think you mentioned Joey Gallo, the most popular player on the team for 2.3%. At 4,400, Joey Gallo should be owned in the mid-teens somewhere. That is a ridiculous misprice. You could argue similar for Anthony Rizzo at 4,600, just way, way underpriced. But Gallo in particular, 38 home runs on the season, a 265 ISO, creates runs 25% better than average, gets on base 35% of the time. I don't care that he's got a 200 batting average with all that power, all that ability to draw walks. He strikes out 34.6% of the time, which people tend to focus on. He also draws 18.3% walks. Both marks, I believe, are second in baseball. So he's just fantastic. Gleyber Torres, struggling through the entire season. Tough ask, but there's still, I believe in the talent. I don't know what's been going on with him, but I believe the talent's still in the bat. So even if you wanted to get there, I would stop short of maybe Urshela, Gardner, and Higgy at the bottom of the lineup. Maybe it's a six-man lineup today. But each of those guys has provided DFS upside in the past and is certainly capable of doing it again.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing here also, we're talking about Jose Barrios, a little bit of good luck this season, 277 BABIP. That's the second best mark of his career, but also that's a little bit fortuitous, not something I would expect to uphold. And then also just talking about the low ownership on the Yankees, comparing them to, say, the Minnesota Twins we talked about before. The Yankees have a 4% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate. The Twins have a 6% chance. But the Yankees are 0.7% projected ownership versus 17% for the Minnesota Twins. So the Twins over 20x the ownership of the New York Yankees. And I don't know, you tell me if the Twins offense ever warrants being 20x the ownership of the Yankees. The answer is more than likely not. But any other stacks here that are pivotal parts of your lineup that are going overlooked by the field today, Terry?
Overlooked. Just taking a look at the DK board. I think the Astros once again are coming up still overlooked on the DK board. I think probably still same story on the FanDuel board. They were in my example a moment ago of teams that I just kind of like getting to when they're going to be under owned, and I think that's the case here again today. They're going up against Drew Rasmussen and they're in the Rays. So Rasmussen over the course of the season, 24.4% strikeout rate over 71 innings, but a good chunk of that was out of the bullpen. In starts, I got to get back to the number here. In starts, Rasmussen has an 18.8% strikeout rate. He had a 3.75 xFIP overall, 0.84 whip as a starter. So the whip and the xFIP are fine, but the strikeouts are really concerning. And we're going up against a team that's contact focused like the Astros are, that doesn't strike out already like the Astros don't. I'm concerned about the Drew Rasmussen spot here. I think they're going to get a bunch of guys on base. They've got plenty of power to hit a home run out against this guy. He's yielded a 50.8% hard hit percentage on the season so far to go with those clunky strikeout numbers as a starter. So I think there's plenty of upside, and the Astros, another team, just not getting any ownership whatsoever. More expensive than the Yankees up and down the lineup on DK, but definitely worth trying to get to.
Yeah, I won't say I have no issue with it because I'm sick and tired of that stupid Houston Astros team because there's no team that I've been on the wrong side of more this year than the Houston Astros. They've been a chalky team and I've been on them. They go score a million runs. Then it's like, oh, look, the Houston Astros, less than 1% on. I'm on the wrong side of them basically every single slate with the Houston Astros. So whenever I cringe when I hear their name, but the season's almost over. So we could rinse and repeat, at least have some futures bets on the Astros. Maybe they'll come through for me in the playoffs and I'll feel good there. But I want to ask you about the Los Angeles Angels, a team who this is going to be more relevant to DraftKings than FanDuel because FanDuel were not, in really a difficult situation to save salary. But on DK today, we've got about an appropriately owned Los Angeles Angels team and a spot against Taylor Hearn, who, hasn't been particularly good this year, although it's not like he's been the worst pitcher in baseball or anything like that. But the Los Angeles Angels, I kind of like both sides of this game a little bit. We've got Taylor Hearn really cheap. The Angels lineup also very, very cheap. So we have Taylor Hearn is the top projected odds being a top 2 value pitcher on the slate. At the same time on DraftKings, the Angels offense has the best chance of being the top value stack. So I kind of think if you're looking to save salary, both sides make sense. Are the Angels a team that are appealing to you just because of the price points?
I would like it better if Taylor Hearn was like the value play du jour, like Taiwan Walker is, and you were throwing this bad lineup at a massive piece of discount ownership on the pitcher side of things. I don't mind it. I don't think you're wrong because there's certainly value in the prices. I just don't love the hitters that we're necessarily getting to outside of the obvious in Ohtani and Jared Walsh. They're batting first and fifth, so the correlation between those two big bats is not necessarily extreme. You need somebody between Phil Gosselin, Jack Mayfield, and Kurt Suzuki there to do something to kind of continue that correlation between the two, or you're getting, a 2-run shot maybe out of Jared Walsh that scores Ohtani. Maybe we get something like that, but it's a little bit tough there. And then outside of those options, Taylor Ward, I expect to turn into an okay player maybe someday. Juan Lagares, we know what he is. Luis Rengifo, David Fletcher, we know he's just a slap hitter down at the bottom of the lineup. There's not a lot to like about this, but they're going up against a pitcher that, I don't think all that much of. I read off his detriments earlier when we were talking about him. So yeah, for no cost and for minimal ownership, there's certainly upside in throwing him up against Taylor Hearn here. I don't dislike it. It's just probably not a standout play in my book, I wouldn't think.
All right. Any other offense you really want to bring up? If not, I'm going to throw out to people. Guys, if you have questions, throw those in. If you have questions, at me in our premium Slack chat. Throw some questions into YouTube. We'll get to those. And then there'll be his questions. If Terry doesn't have other stacks he wants to talk about, we'll go to the top props tool. We can do some run picks. I know people love to throw out their dong predictions. But Terry, any other offenses that we should be looking at today?
I think for similar reasons, and these have been kind of in a decreasing order where they're getting a little bit more popular, but for similar reasons, I think the Dodgers are somewhat interesting going up against Weathers. Weathers over 17 starts over the course of the season, 18.2% strikeout rate. A little out of that is out of the bullpen as well. A 4.56 xFIP on the season, 25.2% strikeouts. There's not a lot there. 43% hard hit, 8.1% barrel rate going up against another team that is, top to bottom, all-stars. Everybody in the projected lineup for the Dodgers has a WRC plus well above average. The average WRC plus across 8 hitters in the projected lineup for the Dodgers, apologies if the confirmed one came out, but in the projected, the average WRC plus was 31% better than average for run creation. That's a really damn good lineup. So anytime they're going under owned, they're difficult to afford, kind of like the Astros are, but they're well worth getting to going up against a pitcher like this in a spot like this. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and then just to rehash, because Eric Johnson asked us about it in the YouTube chat about the Marlins. He says that he's going to be stacking the Marlins, and we didn't really talk about them again because we brought them up way at the top of the slate. But anytime there's a pitcher that's that over-owned, I kind of think it makes sense to go to the offense. Now it's a 13-game slate, so I don't think like 10% Marlins stacks is warranted. But if over the course of 150 lineups, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5% or so, just for leverage purposes, because if you look at our tools right here with Taiwan Walker, and once again, I'm going to give this a refresh to see if anything changed with the pitcher ownership while we're talking about offenses. But Taiwan Walker is projected for 36% ownership right now on DK with a 15% chance to be a top 2 scoring pitcher. That's just, way too much ownership going towards him. Over on FanDuel, 22.4% ownership with a 6.5% chance to be a top scoring pitcher. He is the most negatively leveraged individual play on the slate. So just for that purpose and with the overall variance of baseball, that's what gets me on the Marlins. It has nothing to do with me liking the Marlins. It's just that we've got a pitcher they're going up against that isn't particularly good and is really over-owned. If Taiwan Walker was 10, 15% owned, I wouldn't have any interest in the Marlins. But because of where his ownership is, that's what gets me to Miami.
Yeah, totally agree. It's just about attacking a third of the field or more, or 40% of the field when you can play these guys. It's a ASOBE asks, who on the Marlins do I like the most? I'm literally about to say that, so tune in. I also set it up at the top of the show, but I found another guy at the bottom of the lineup that I want to talk about. So the guys I really like in this lineup, who I think are individually talented baseball players, are Jazz Chisholm and Jesus Sanchez. I think Lewis Brinson is a post-hype prospect kind of a guy who occasionally can provide a little bit of upside. I think Lewin Diaz is outperforming his talent, but right now he's got a 272 ISO and his 8 home runs over 108 plate appearances. Jesus Sanchez has a 244 ISO, 14 home runs over 245 plate appearances. So you string some of those guys together. You can attach Miguel Rojas to the top of that from the top spot. You can put Brian De La Cruz in there. You could also go down to the bottom of the lineup, interestingly. Alex Jackson has a catcher play for 2,900, no ownership whatsoever. He's hitting 8th. That kid's got titanic power. It hasn't been shown at all at the major league level yet. He's only, I think, like 25 years old. But so far, over 123 plate appearances in AAA this year, he's got 11 home runs and a 407 ISO. That's ridiculous. In 2019, over 345 plate appearances in AAA with Atlanta's system, he hit 28 home runs and had a 304 ISO. Also ridiculous. He's an aggressive strikeout guy, 34.2% strikeout rate that season. In this season in AAA, down to 28.5%. So big time power, could be totally sneaky. Nobody's going to be playing him. So if you want a catcher along with the rest of those guys, he wraps around to the top. You kind of need somebody from Lewin Diaz, Lewis Brinson, or Eddie Alvarez to get on base for him if he's going to hit one out for you. But I think there could be sneaky value there.
All right. So with that said, it doesn't look like there's too many questions over there in the YouTube chat. So Terry, I'm going to bring up some of the some of the overall best prop plays that we have in our top props pool, and something here that I wouldn't say it's cause for concern because you and I don't like him quite as much as the field, but Taiwan Walker's over-under for strikeouts is only 4.5 today. And considering the matchup against the Miami Marlins, there's a reason the field is getting towards him. Nearly 40% on DK and over 20% on FanDuel. While I think that is too much ownership, I think on average he strikes out more than 4.5 hitters. So I'm curious, how many strikeouts do you have Walker projected for? Because we do have that as one of the best bets in our player props tool.
Yeah, I've got him over 6. I think that's a strong bet. I'm surprised it's that low. His strikeout acumen is not incredible, but that Miami team strikes out a hell of a lot against right-handed pitching. 25.5% strikeout rate, second worst in baseball this season. Excuse me, third worst in baseball this season. Yeah, fire away. I like that a lot. Even if we don't like Taiwan Walker for DFS purposes, there's enough talent and enough strikeout acumen that he can get to that 4.5 number without all that much fanfare here.
Yeah, and once again, I mean, he could have 5 strikeouts, not have a great fantasy game, hit the over there, and it's a number that I just think is certainly set too low. Let's hit on some home run picks today. And by the way, everybody in YouTube chat, throw in your YouTube picks. We'd like to know who you guys are picking for home run. Also, Terry and I only have a couple minutes left on the air, but don't go anywhere. Also, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got PGA Live Before Lock is going to be coming up right after this, but. Home run picks, Terry. Who is at the top of your board to go yard tonight?
So I kind of spoiled it earlier, but I give it away in the column at the beginning of the day anyway. And the very top of my board, actually by a margin of 2 whole home run points, whatever I'm calling him, Mr. Pete Alonso from the New York Mets going up against Eliezer Hernandez. We talked about Hernandez's inflated home run rate in a very small sample this season. Home runs are weird. They're wonky. Pete Alonso is one of the better home run hitters in baseball when he's going right. So why not? There's a whole hell of a lot of Red Sox up there as well.
All right. I don't know if anybody knows, my camera briefly fell off my computer. It kind of slid off the top and it was just pointing up for a while. So anybody who saw my ceiling, that was very exciting. Some of the home run picks that we're seeing in the YouTube chat. We've got MySpace Tom. He's going with Michael Conforto, Brandon Towers, Adolis Garcia, Josh of Los Angeles going with Nicky Lopez, Greek Inc. He's going with Bobby Dahlback. We got the news god himself. He's going with Kike Hernandez. Hutchboy going with Sal Perez. By the way, Salvador Perez, crazy power year for a catcher. This guy's, I know there's only a week left in the season. This guy might get hot and end up with 60 homers. I know he's at 47 right now, but I'm not going to put it past the legend Sal Perez to not hit 13 over the last week.
If he does that, I'm going to win my Dynasty League. I'm pretty confident in that. If Sal hits me 13 more home runs.
And we've got a lot of them coming in right now. Paul Goldschmidt in there, Austin Riley, another one for Adolis Garcia. And I'll say the name just because Ryan Renenbaum is trying to throw me off. But he's given a home run call to Mike Hunt, which also, hey, listen, if he goes yard today, I've no issues with that. I'm going to give out.
That up? That's really clever. Did he just make that up?
No. That's like one of those. It's a little raunchy for The Simpsons, except
you actually think I'd never heard that before?
Oh, did you? I don't know.
I was trying to.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I don't know Josh's dad. If what you saw as a kid back in the 30s.
I actually should have let you go another 30 seconds trying to explain it to me. Hey, look,
anyway.
all those guys that the chat named are in my top 10, top 15, top 20 here in the home run board. So good job, chat. That was a pretty good list of home run picks. And yeah, Sally Perez already broke the record for catcher home runs for a single season.
Yeah, just an absolutely crazy year for him. I'm going to go right back to the well with the New York Yankees. By the way, the number 1 home run pick in our player props tool, Gleyber Torres stage plus 875 to homer today. Is he the most likely player on the slate to homer? No, but plus 875. We have him homering 13% of the time tonight at plus 875 odds. That makes it a positive EV bet. For me, I'm going right back to the well with somebody I went with last night, and that is Giancarlo Stanton. Once again, a little bit too cheap on DraftKings, a little bit too cheap on. This guy should be one of the most expensive hitters every single slate. He's got crazy power. Nobody's ever rostering Stanton these days. If he goes against the Orioles, fine, people are playing him, but nobody played him last night against Hyun-Jin Ryu. He had a home run, and I'm going once again back-to-back, another night with Giancarlo Stanton as my home run pick. That is going to do it for Terry and I tonight. Everybody, guys, good luck and stick around. PGA Live Before Lock is next.